I could do top ramen, but I'm gonna go for something a little different. That's right, we're doing dogs on the hot plate. Heck yeah, if there's a better way to live free, I don't know what it is. I have got this figured out. Woo! Yeah!
Can I suggest a strong password?
Okay.
Your password is 4TY at HK, BC and 7.
I'm never going to remember that.
Didn't quite cook that all the way. Life's good, man. Life's good. I need to actually make a list and make sure that I grab everything from the RV, because I've got cupboards, I've got 2 years worth of stuff in the RV that I've still got to get through and make sure that I grab all of my stuff. Hey, wait, it's Sean, the big Sean from Modified Auto. How's it going, buddy?
I'm sorry, buddy. I didn't know you were filming.
I'm just making my video for the...
Hey, just real quick. Do you have a second?
Yeah, what's up?
Bro, is that pee?
I'm gonna take all the pee jugs with me. I promise. I'm not gonna leave those here at the shop. I'm just taking it with me.
How long are you gonna be staying, man?
Bro, it's not. I just need a couple months. There's a lot of changes. Like, this is a big downgrade. Like 6 months top, and then I'll get out of here.
Bro, listen, I love you, man, and you know, if it wasn't for the foreclosure, you couldn't stay here this
I
long.
am so
Just look forward in the dangers of e-personality. He's an introvert, incel or whatever, and when he comes out on the internet, he has this, like the dark side of his subconscious becomes conscious. I mean, to me, it's obvious. It's what happens. It's what's happening to you on the same way. But your unconscious, your subconscious is different than Gandalf's subconscious.
Logic and science dictate that not only consciousness doesn't exist, consciousness is in fact scientifically impossible. And yes, it is going to involve math and calculus and science and computer programming. I'm sorry. And that have different implications of the process with the connection between the levels of a person's soul and how it reincarnates.
But I'm not gonna spurge on the issue because I'm not a woman. It's not my issue.
About how one day you're gonna fulfill the Canadian dream and the American dream. So you watch Seinfeld and say, oh, I could do it, and I'm gonna go out tomorrow, go to work, and have a great day, and I'm gonna be successful. And one day I'm gonna have my own apartment, I'm gonna have my own parties with my own friends over, and I'm gonna have my own possessions. I'm gonna see things that I want and just buy them.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Week in Review with Doooovid. Looking forward to our chat this evening. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight. Doooovid, I'll hand it over to you for the introductions.
Hey, good to be back, Jennifer, and had a pretty good week this week. I know half Galicians mentioned you haven't done the chant in a few weeks because Passover took a week off, and then last week Jennifer started the show without me, so I could wait till sundown, and Gandalf and memes were on, and so he didn't do a chant. So I'll make sure to do a chant this week, and but streaming was a good week today. Root and Branch was back, so we had Emmanuel Rund, a pretty prominent person. Like if you're into Judaism, Holocaust, Zionism, different things, like a huge name. I think he even won an Oscar for one of his documentaries, but he spoke again. And I actually introduced him because Les was still working. He runs his dental office and can't get out till a certain time. So we started the show without him. So I did the introduction. So I'll put that link in the chat. I was on Luke Ford this week, and he asked me, Charles Moskowitz, we didn't stream this week. So that's what me and Charles were talking about. Because usually what me and Charles are talking about is more likely that something me and Luke would talk about. But I told him I wasn't on, and so he asked me about Week in Review, and so I mentioned that we were talking about the Eric Weinstein interview on Joe Rogan's new theories, and so it turned out that Luke had prepared something and also wanted to talk about that. So we talked about that, and then after I left, Luke did like 40 minutes on the Joe Rogan Weinstein, and he had some pretty good insight. So maybe we'll talk about that. I think memes may have signed up to take part in our experiment of the science of expertise, where me and Jennifer are going to turn memes into a renowned expert on dueling, such that he will be able to go on live streams and talk to different people and have this expertise level that we'll talk about in like the science of streaming, that it's good to be a subject expert since he likes dueling, that we'll turn him into a subject expert on dueling, and we'll see how that works out for his streaming. So if he's on later, that'll be interesting. And I think Jennifer streamed with him. And I think exciting for today, God forbid, is we're probably going to do a deep dive on cremation, and God forbid, maybe talk a little bit about the concentration camps, the death camps, but more the holy sites in India, like Varanasi, and in Nepal, the religious sites where people have been for thousands of years going to get cremated, and more about the Agori, and just some interesting research on possibly the development of crematoria and the regulation in Britain, and various things. So I thought Jennifer also found that topic interesting, and it's very related to reincarnation and the science of death, and kind of regulating religion in India today, where they have new mechanized ways of cremating people that were already around in like the 1850s when the British ruled India, that they had wanted to take over and better the cremation religious rites to it, and but the nature of cremation, that the soul leaves the body, should be done in the open. It should be done on wood. So most people don't want to use the modern technology, but God forbid. It was in Tablet magazine this week. They released pictures of the Grand Mufti touring a concentration camp. And interesting, Subra Chandras Bose was there also, being toured a concentration camp. And it's not surprising. There are new pictures being released, but Subra Chandras Bose, who was Prabhupada of ISKCON's childhood friend and considered one of the founder of the Indian Revolutionary Army that fought against the British with the help of Hitler. But Subra Chandras Bose writes in his autobiography that he was aware what was happening to the Jews, that he personally liked the Jews. He didn't agree with what the Nazis. I'm not sure if he went as far as to say he opposed it, but he said he relatively had a positive view towards Jews, but he had no power, and his goal was to help India. But it'd be interesting to say that pictures come out that he did actually tour a concentration camp, and the pictures were released this week. They were bought at an auction to the use of the crematoria, God forbid, in the death camp, and the likelihood of Nepal that the Nazis had probably studied, or not even the Nazis, but the British and the Germans going back 100 years have been familiar with these cremation sites in India, and had basically used that technology in Europe, God forbid, during the Holocaust. And also like some conspiracy theory about renegade like Agori or Vaishnavas that possibly even would have helped out in Europe running these crematoria. So it's actually quite a bit of research. But so a lot to talk about. And I guess I want to do the chant, but hand it over to Jennifer.
No, it's all good. Why don't you do the chant and just open things up, and then I can talk about my week.
Okay, so I put in the link this. I'm going to do a Hasidic tune, and this kind of like a hero's journey, and I believe this is the one that they sang every Friday night in Kiryas Tush, which is outside of Montreal. And Tush was a town in Hungary, I believe. And God forbid, a Jewish town, Hasidic town, where there were probably non-Jews and Jews living in segregated different sections of the town, and maybe a few thousand Jews, maybe even over tens of thousands. And that Hasidic group resettled in Montreal, and through the Rebbe, the descendant of the rabbi who had been kind of like a royal rabbinic settlement in Hungary for at least 100 years, a few generations, gets resettled in outside of Montreal. And first they build up, they get get some money, get some real estate, get some followers, built up a synagogue in the Jewish section of Montreal, to where he eventually was like, it's no good to be a Hasidic person living in urban Montreal, and created a settlement. And this Rabbi Meshulam Feivish passed away a few years ago. I was in Tush. I went to a wedding there. I actually drove the son of Rabbi Yecheskel Roth, who passed away a few months ago. Ramosha Roth, whose son I think is quite popular right now. God forbid, even a negative way for like conducting child marriages or something like that. But I'd been in Kiryas Tush. I'd seen the Tusher Rebbe, and this is a famous tune that I think they use for L'chad Dodi, but it's a pretty common Hasidic tune. It's a Botkin tune at weddings. So Hasidic weddings, at the end, a person kind of gets up and jokes around and speaks, and usually does it to a tune. And it's you're kind of like rapping a musical tune. I hope I don't mess this up. The beginning part was a little bit tricky. I was trying to remember it. I didn't have a tape to listen to, but it's a basic 3-part tune that starts out slow. You get an introduction of kind of like the hero's journey, and then it has the dissonance added in resolution to the heroic overcoming of the hero's journey. That's why it's a very popular Hasidic tune, and it's also a chanting tune that you could have thousands of people chanting together in harmony. It's a very easy tune to harmonize to. So one person could sing it at their Sabbath meal to their family. I said in Tush, I think they use the tune every Friday night, and so here it goes. Ay, 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 ma, 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 ay, 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 oy, oy, ma, ay, 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 mama, ay, 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 mama, mama, ay, ya, mama, mama, na, 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 ya 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 ya. Oy 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 ya. Ay ya ya ya. Oy 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 ya. Ay, 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 mama, 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 mama. Ay, 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 ay. So I have a nice Hasidic tune. I'm pretty sure that tune probably goes back a few hundred years in Europe. But as I said, if you went to COVID-19, unfortunately, I think they're having a little difficulties as not wanting to obey the government's guidelines as much as the government wants to enforce. But generally, Hasidim, most people work and people are religious. But the religion, everyone communally comes together Sabbath, and it's the Rebbe, the people who study, the priestly class that are 24/7 involved in religion. So Friday night, when the whole congregation comes together, your average person wasn't that involved in religion. Maybe they prayed, but like the Sabbath is the time where they get to return to the dissonance of the work and the extra harshness of the external world. So if you were in Montreal and went to Sabbath in the Hasidic settlement, Friday night, I believe for decades, that would have been the tune. Probably even still, that if you came in Friday, that there would be a little chanting, and then all of a sudden people would break out in song, and that would set the mood for Sabbath. And because it's a Jewish settlement, it would be a communal thing because everybody in the settlement would be gathered, and that would be the song that they're chanting, and it has that nice kind of hero's journey to it. So welcome to Week in Review.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. A very nice one, Doovid. Yeah, so my week was pretty interesting. Had a little family come visit, and I was doing a lot of cooking and cleaning and tidying up the garden and stuff. Also wrote up a little explanation of that thing I sort of discovered on the show last week about the Gauss theorem and how you can derive it without having to invoke calculus. So I wrote that up. I sent it to Doovid, so thanks for that. And I also sent it to Memes of Destruction, who might be joining us at some point in the show. He has the link if he wants to hop on. He was kind enough to extend an invitation to me this week to talk about my theory, which, as far as talks about the theory go, is one of the better ones. Like that one we did with Les and Lowell, that was really good. I thought that just because of it was a focused conversation, and I was able to get some points across that I felt like that some of them really did land. With this, it wasn't clear to me what he wanted to discuss. I realized about 5 minutes before the show started that he had titled it Jen Talks About, or something, Church Venture talks about the Gauss theorem, and I was like, okay, so he wants me to go over that. But I realized that might be a little tough if his audience had no background in my theory. So we did go through that a little bit, which I thought was super interesting. And he's a good sport. And then he got another one of his pals on the stream about halfway through, a guy who's got a big project, and it's called Prometheus. It's kind of his baby. He told me a little bit about that, and hopefully we'll be able to meet him at some point, and he can grow his audience via this show. So yeah, thanks for the intro, and thanks to all the people in the audience. Nice to see all the regulars as well as some new ones. I see Deshaun is there. What's going on, buddy? Nice to see you. Back over to you, Doovid.
Okay, so if you want to talk another minute or two, I'm preparing and I'll do a screen share. So I have a few just interesting news things. And then, if Memes isn't here now, maybe we'll do the deep dive into cremation. And I found some good visuals. And, if you go to India, these are the type things that are actually tourist attractions. But if you study theology, really the cremation process is one of the central aspects of reincarnation, and probably the difference why Abrahamic religions get buried and other Vedic religions generally have cremation.
Yeah, I was a little shocked when you started talking about that. I was like, ooh, this is really dark. But then I was like, that's no excuse. We must go bravely where few have gone before and be scientists.
That's the role of the Brahmin, is to perform those rites. So in Varanasi, you actually have the caste system set up in a way to from the people who do the work, to chop the wood, to the priests who know the theology, who say the special mantras, who perform the rites, or if there's people who clean the body and various things. So I mean, Judaism too, you have people that do that important service of like cleaning the body, and they even call it chesed shelemis, the true kindness, taking care of the dead. But it's probably one of the most important functions in larger Hinduism is the death rites. So your average person, that's when they seek religious counsel. If the only time in their life when their parents die, and they worry about, are their parents going to heaven or hell? Are they going to have a good next reincarnation, or various things, to basically turning to the trust of the priest, where the priest says, I've been studying and doing this my whole life. I went to special institutes. I studied under the sages of the generations that have, the sampradaya, the lineage going back generations to the, acharyas, the believed sages or prophets that had some special insight to understand it. And this is the ritual. This is the mantra. And I know you didn't take religion seriously that much your whole life, but here you are at the, God forbid, the funeral of your parents, and generally people just turn themselves over to to the priest, to the rabbi, and accept that that they have expertise in the subject. But it's something that largely, it's probably the single biggest factor that drives people to religion, the eventual death of their parents. And so the cremation process from Hinduism, besides knowing like, okay, it's, like, what does even the word Hinduism mean? It's a set of shared practices and beliefs from a geographical region, where that includes generally reincarnation and cremation. So we're talking about Hinduism and reincarnation. So God forbid, the cremation process is integral to it, and it is extremely in-depth discussed in the scripture.
Interesting perspective. So what got you thinking about all that, the cremation stuff?
Yeah, so let me do a screen share, and because I hadn't been thinking too much about the Holocaust and World War II. Generally, it's a subject I research a lot, I know a lot about. I'm constantly reading books and in new. Let me redo that, make sure it works. But since COVID-19 happened, I've been spending more time on science, than sitting around reading up on World War II. So I'm going to show it's this article that came out in Tablet that largely. So am I presenting?
Yeah, I'm just working on full screening you right now, but I'm almost there.
So let me get a few things of these off my desk. So I booked this week, Judas Maccabeus on Adam Green, and they debate rather kind of like Talmud, the general theology of Judaism, not too much on current news, more just like general, could be like a modern day debate, just like Talmud, good or bad. And, it's pretty good. I'm not sure we could talk about that if you want, but I'll put that link in the chat. Did you watch that?
Sorry, which one? I'm sorry, I was just fixing I didn't actually hear anything you said because I was fixing the mono concentrated on fixing your screen. You are full screen now, by the way. 100%.
Yeah, so I was just mentioning the Judas Maccabeus on Adam Green. It's actually through Jennifer.
Okay, yes. I did catch part of that. I didn't catch most of it. It really wasn't what I was interested in, and I don't really like the way I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be mean or anything.
Well, I just say the topic didn't really interest you. If you're saying, I mean, if that's what you're saying, you're just saying something else. Like you didn't really want to listen.
It's not that the topic doesn't interest me. It's the way that it's being presented. It's like anecdotes from Talmud. How dare the Talmud say this? Will you address this?
Adam's approach.
It ends up being this big pill pull thing, and it's like, well, what was achieved through this conversation? I guess it is unclear what the goal is. So I'm a goal-oriented person, and if it's just it's kind of the way you are with small talk. I guess it's like, where's this going?
I would completely disagree. I'm saying like the debate, like whether the Talmud is good or bad, is one of the single most important debates in all of Western history that has been done
that may
over
be
and
the
over
case.
again
That may be
through
the
the greatest
case.
minds. Saying that they're rehashing this debate is like, it was like, of course.
Well, that may be the case. I just didn't like the way that the conversation was broached. I guess I didn't feel that it was going in a direction that was leading to information. Not disagreeing with what you're saying. It's just that particular conversation. I didn't see where it was going.
Let me just get these off my desk. I mean, we could talk, especially if someone else wants to come in, we could talk as much as we want about the Adam Green and the, Talmud debate. And that's my expertise. And I just say, like, yeah, it's not that popular of a subject. It's a niche subject. Even among Jews, Talmud isn't that popular of a subject. Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities from England. I forget where there's some article about it. And I saw that, and it's too big to share. So that wasn't that interesting. There were some statistics about that. So there's all stuff on cremation, and we'll keep that open. So here was just something interesting. If Jenna wants to comment, just I guess India borders on Myanmar, and there's also a border crisis in India that they're closing the border to Myanmar, and the right-wing government in India is generally nationalistic and less likely to take refugees and be anti-immigration. So I just thought that was interesting that there's a parallel thing happening in India and Myanmar to the U.S. and Europe immigration crises. I'm not sure if you were following that.
I guess I'm aware of it. Yeah, that like these Westerners aren't aware that there's crises going on anywhere else but in the West, and since the only thing they know about is the West, they think it's the worst in the West. It's like, no, it's the other way around. The West is rich because of what the calamity going on in the rest of the world. So, yeah, it's good to shed a light on this these things not being a phenomenon restricted to the West. That India's been putting up with this horse shit for a lot longer than some of these people have even existed.
Yeah, so we could talk about this if we want, but it's interesting to mention. MIT put out this week, I guess this course was offered in the fall, of the physics of COVID-19 transmission. I listened to the first quarter of it, so I highly recommend this to people. It's a lot of mathematics and physics. Just goes over how the virus informed inside the anatomy and the mathematics and actually the equations and the physics, and how it gets put into the air, how long it stays in the air, and different as ventilation and other factors. So I think entropist type audience would probably find this pretty interesting. I found a new course on microbiology I might watch, or science also. So I haven't had time to check this out, but if someone wants to check out the Wisdom Center, you can see I'm on lecture 16. I got through lecture 16, and these just came out a few days ago, April 8th. So just came out a few days ago. I'm already through lecture 16. Highly encourage people. So this tablet article is what made me look into cremation, and there was an auction, and someone bought these pictures, and these pictures had not previously been released. And for Israel, Zionism, Jews, they're important for different reasons, but historically it's interesting. Just for whatever reason, there had been a tour of forced labor camp Trebin. So it wasn't actually a death camp, it was a forced labor camp. And so the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem is there, and Subra Chandras Bose is there, another few known characters from World War II are there, as well as the people who go on to God forbid, become huge mass murderers in the Holocaust. So these this was in the news that these pictures were released for the first time, and so it's not surprising. Like, it's not like a big news drop. And so I mentioned to Jennifer the conspiracy theory that you mentioned, that the Germans were the first culture to largely start studying the Vedic religions. The first European language, I think, would translate. The Bhagavad Gita was into German already back into like the 1700s, maybe 1600s, and the German people generally were the most receptive to the Vedas, at least earlier in the period. I'm not saying universally all Germans, were big into this stuff, but relatively, it was most popular and well known in Germany, and also people that traveled to India. And there's different Buddhism, Hinduism, various sects, just like general knowledge of scriptures, Veda, versus say Hinduism and practices in famous tourist sites like Jagannath Puri, Lord Jagannath Ratha Yatha, that just a huge festival. People would tour India and they'd be familiar, like, have you seen the Ratha Yatha festival? And people knew of what were called ghats in Varanasi. So you want to say something about ghats in Varanasi? Do you know anything about this?
No, not especially, but I was going to say something about Germans and the Veda. So that there's a word for Germany in ancient Sanskrit. So that's probably why they like it so much, because they're descended of Indian colonists that colonized the Rhineland. But yeah, please tell us more about the not sacrificial rites, sorry, the funeral rites.
Okay, so Sri Nandana, Stephen Knapp, chairman of the board of Detroit ISKCON, he's been here to Varanasi many times and taken pictures. I'm not sure if there's that much connection with ISKCON, or if ISKCON, they might have, but a ghat is generally a staircase built into the Ganges as part of a temple where people basically bathe in the Ganges. So the ghat is like this temple here, and the staircase goes straight down into the Ganges, and the people bathe. And so that's a generic ghat. And anybody who's been to a holy site in India, so here are the Ghats of Varanasi, and I guess there's it's probably from scripture, and there's 88 of them, 88 different Ghats of Varanasi. So 2 of the Ghats are crematoria, where people go. So people bathe in the Ganges as a righteous, etiquette. It's proper etiquette if you're, to bathe in the Ganges. It's a proper thing to do. That a few times a year or once every period of time, you should go and bathe in the Ganges. And but on top of that, when a person dies, the most optimal thing to be done, according to most experts, is that the body should be cleaned, then dipped into the Ganges, then cremated, and then put back into the Ganges. And I'm not an expert on this, but generally, that's the preferred practice, and it would be a ceremony where the family and friends of the people there would witness the whole thing. It would be done in public. So this is a temple in Nepal, and this would have been the temple that likely the Germans would have been more familiar with than Varanasi. Varanasi is more related to Hinduism. This one also, the Kathmandu's Pashupatinath temple. And so that's a very popular temple to be cremated at, which just means that, like if you're a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim, that when you die, you go to the funeral house, and that's where you have your funeral, and you trust that the rabbis and the people in charge know how to take care of the body, and you go out to the graveyard and have the burial. So in Hinduism, not everybody goes to famous pilgrimage sites or the Ganges for a funeral, but it's pretty well accepted that a lot of times you'll be cremated, like in America, and we'll talk about the technology where you just get cremated in whatever fashion, and then you take the ashes and you spread the ashes on the Ganges. So like in ISKCON or your Hindus in America, to decide and recognize I'm about to die, let me return to India, or to even have the body to die in America and have the body shipped to India in order that the person could be dipped in the Ganges and then cremated, is pretty impractical. But being cremated and getting the ashes and then taking the ashes to the Ganges is pretty common. You're familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, preferably this would be what would be done, and there would be priests, and not the priests, like the people who carry the body or do the work, might be actually a lot of cases still till today is by caste. That there's caste of people that there's actually like a huge division of labor, and some of these sites they could, I think, I'm not sure if it's 300 or if it's much more. And then also as just a right of, we'll talk about the Agori, but just as a right of justice, that all bodies deserve to have some sort of proper respect to it at death. So you have, a priestly class that makes money off of that. That's their job. And if you're, respected priest who does funerals, you might do funerals of famous people and millionaires, and high birth people, but at the same time, all people deserve some sort of proper, in Hinduism, cremation, and even the mantras being said. So there would be a Brahminic class that carries out these rites in rituals, and even the Agori. So if people are more academic, here's an academic article on the Ghats in Varanasi, and it's very interesting, the history of the British. And so here's a picture you would see of wood. So according to scripture and usually best understanding of karma, it's actually mango tree. that a person's body would be burnt on mango tree and in the open, and but obviously for poor people or the common person that no one cares to have given their dead body proper care, giving burning everybody with mango wood is improper, impractical, and already in the British control. In the priest, actually, it's the government. These ghats in India are actually government certified. I think they might even have government offices on site at the temple where you could get a death certificate. I'm not sure. I mean, have you been to India like that, Jennifer?
No.
Maybe ConOps or something would see that, but I was saying that there'd actually be a government office of that would issue the death certificate at the temple or near the temple, and it could even be paid for by taxes or different things. And so already in the 1850s, they were they had electric crematoria because the British had determined it's impractical to burn all these bodies. And so here's an academic paper about the history of crematoria, which was largely introduced by the British into India as an environmental factor that is like it's not sanitary for all these cremations to be taking place right there on the Ganges and burning all this wood or whatever. So they introduced the most modern technology, and you see that God forbid that will play in the Holocaust, that the Nazis had been familiar with this, just like the rounding up of the American Indians into concentration camps. That was a basis for concentration camps. The crematoria in India were a basis for the crematoria in the death camps, and they were actually over 100 years. They really perfected the method. Largely, I said, because the British control, and they thought it was just bad optics. So here's more pictures of Varanasi. Varanasi is a beautiful place. If you toured India as a pilgrim, Varanasi would be likely one of the places you would go. And if you were a religious person, you would go to dip in the Ganges. Not like as a tourist to take pictures, or like as some anthropologist who wants to study the crematoria. You would go to purify our bad karma by dipping in the Mother Ganges. And so I want to mention last about the Agori. So there's a dispute in the origins of the Agori. So there's Vaishnavas who perform these rites, like taking care of the dead bodies if no one else cares about, and in legend, these Babis and supposedly lived for hundreds of years, and would stay in the forest and do these austerities, and then they just come and operate the crematoria, and actually the operating of the crematoria is one of the most important tasks, to some extent. I'm saying like being scholarly, teaching scripture, but I'm saying like that the operation of the crematoria are an integral part of India and Hindu nationalism, because that's what people do. They get cremated, and it's preferable to be cremated on the Ganges, and so it's a big logistic challenge to run these. So this man, Baba Karinaram, which there's disputes whether he was 150 years ago or 350 years ago, is considered the modern day founder of the Agori ascetic sects. Although in legend, the Agoris are a Vaishnava sect that always existed going back into the past. And, like the CNN, God forbid, cannibalism and things like that, as I said, the foundation of the Agori is generally could be viewed as benevolent and is basically this man who realized the bad karma that was being created because people weren't properly performing the Brahminic rites, namely the Brahminic rites of death. And if the Brahmins are corrupt and they're only performing the Brahminic rites for millionaires and prominent people, what about the common man who's dying or doesn't have loved ones or family that are going to properly perform the death rituals? So like a secret sect of priests, maybe Brahminic, maybe Baba Karinaram was actually a devotee of Mother Kali, Vaishnava Kali, partially Vaishnava, but more Kali. But you would have just like Ramakrishna was a devotee of Kali, but Ramakrishna wasn't performing these rites, and so you had to have this like hidden secretive sect that performs these rites. And I think the Agori actually officially run some of the Ghats. So there might be like who exactly the Agori are. Is there like the mythical, mysterious Agori? Are there just a bunch of like stoners that call themselves Agori, or like sannyasis, people that to retire from life and they live on the Ganges and they hang out at the crematory and smoke weed or something like that, and even like perversions and sexual acts or stuff like that, versus the basic, what does it say in scripture? How is it founded within Hinduism, this purpose? And it's saying the purpose is that there has to be the dirty task of performing the death rites for people who have no one else to perform the death rites for them.
Yeah, I guess it's something that's a little harder to understand when you don't take reincarnation for granted. Because, like, if you don't, then you're just sort of wondering. You're still stuck in just the one life perspective of, like, maybe nothing happens, maybe something happens, I don't know. So you tend to ruminate on that. But if you take reincarnation for granted, it's like, well, when you tend to ruminate that way, it's more along the lines of, well, how am I going to be reincarnated in my next life? Will I have just as good of a family or maybe better, or I don't want it to be any worse? And so the manner in which you die is of significant importance within your total karmic cycle, because it's like the jumping off point. Because once you're disembodied, you don't have any new energy coming into your mind, so you're just basically stuck with whatever you got. And if your death was horrifying in some way or caused cognitive dissonance, that's going to be a lot more traumatic, and there's going to be a lot more loss of memory. And memory is considered very important because you remember knowledge, and knowledge is the antidote to suffering. So it all sort of comes back to the ahimsa principle. So yeah, it is super important. And if you think of it from the perspective of the person who's administering the actual ceremony, it's like, I get it. Like, think about a lifetime where all you have to do is meditate. Now, that's probably intimidating for a lot of people, and it might sound boring, but maybe the whole secular life seems boring to some of us, right? So maybe just having the freedom to totally just sit, calm the mind, breathe evenly, expand the consciousness, to have a full lifetime to be able to do that is great. And to not put a burden on the rest of society to fund this lifestyle, i.e. just having a very low energy needs, right? Like they historically live in boneyards. They're even reputed to be cannibals, though I'm not sure to what extent that actually happens. But you could see it's just like, well, it's free meat, right? Like, I'm not saying that I'm down to cannibalize, but we want to build empathy for all the different vocations in society so that we can have a certain amount of gratitude for people doing the jobs that it might be, easy for them, quote unquote, but pretty unthinkable for most.
I forgot to share it. Here is a 40-minute clip of Luke Ford, his analysis of Eric Weinstein. Let's put that in the chat. It's actually probably peak Luke Ford at his best. And here's an interesting lecture of Susanna Heschel, who actually is Avram Yeshua Heschel's daughter, the rabbi who marched with Dr. King, and his daughter is a professor of Judaic studies, and she wrote a book called The Aryan Jesus, and she discusses before the Holocaust, how Christian theology, in her image turned Jesus into an anti-Semitic Aryan, and the tracing of it. And I'd say her scholarship on Aryanism is rather limited, but she does go through quite a bit of the literature and quote some of the various Christian theologians and how they worded things, and show how they basically try to turn Jesus into an Aryan through scholarship of some sort of type.
Yeah, but when they said Aryan, they meant European, right?
Well, they probably meant what they understood to be this ancient race that established civilization.
So the white villaging nomads, the white-skinned alien nomads.
I don't know why you got to get stupid when I bring this up. I'm saying there was their theory.
Well, that's what they're. I'm not the one who came up with this stupid theory, as you call it. I'm asking you, is that how they understood the Aryans?
Well, there's it's like sectarianism. There's a lot of different understandings, and saying that people who were Christians and were anti-Jewish at the same time, that saying the Jesus they believed in wasn't Jewish. The Jesus they believed in was an Aryan, and in all likelihood the same Aryan so that they believe created Vedic cultures, and the same Aryans that they believed they were descended from. So so just a book, interesting book from a Jewish perspective, purely on the church and how they viewed Christianity, and I mean we talk more about that, and just back on the crematoria and reincarnation and the importance of cremation. The scripture mentions the Ganges. So if besides the pure science of cremation and reincarnation that could be generalized to the death of any person anywhere, that from the scripture of Vedic scripture, that there's something special karmatically about having the body dipped in the Ganges and the ultimate destination of the ashes after cremation, being the Ganges. And I'm not an expert enough in Hinduism to fully understand that, but I mean it's pretty clear that kind of like as a Jew, like Jerusalem is the center of creation, the focal point of all of the universe, that the Ganges is that factor in Hinduism. That's like where creation comes from, that maybe in some process, like from dust to dust, that in Hinduism it's from the Ganges to the Ganges, but that there should be some purifying process, and that purifying process, and so Jews also have the same basic superstition. However, it's a mikveh, just like a generic ritual bath where the body is cleaned and then dipped into a mikveh and then dressed and buried. But the idea of dipping the dead body in a holy water before the final death rite is actually common, and karmatically, I guess it makes sense that even after death, so if the soul has already left the body, or what happens to the body, that what difference would it make, this purifying act of dipping the dead body in either the Ganges or Judaism ritualistic mikveh, that would be so important that that of course they would do it. Like anybody who wanted to properly care for their a dead person, like of course they would want the body cleaned and then dipped into this ritual bath, because presumably it has tremendous implications about what's going to happen to the person's fate after they've left their body. Or I'm not sure if you had any comment on that.
Oh, it's just showing respect, and I mean, just from what you're describing there, Doovid, I mean, you're talking within the cradle of humanity there. It's within that latitudinally.
I would say the cradle of civilization, and maybe the cradle of humanity is actually Africa. I know a lot of people want to screech about that.
I'm going up from the equator and down from the equator. I'm kind of equating in an optimal zone and hoping for the best.
And just to mention, when I first in
I may be
Jerusalem,
geographically incorrect.
when I was first in Jerusalem and in New York, one of the common things that I did, trying to fit in the Jewish community, was go to the graveyard and help make a minyan. And from a religious point of view, it's actually, like they have the seminary and people are in the seminary. Like I mentioned the song from Curious Tush or something like that. And there's special mantras that believe have an effect on the soul or the dead after that need 10 people to say those mantras. So people will come into the seminary and pick up, like yeshiva students to come to the graveyard. Sometimes live and pay. I got paid a few times. Like, some come like I need to say Kaddish at the graveyard, and they'll pay people to come to the graveyard with them. And there's a lot of parallels within Hinduism, but just mention from at least the theological aspect of Judaism, that even just saying the mantras, that there's enough people, a quorum of 10 people at the graveyard to say special mantras, has a lot of precedence that would say from what's said in the books, that like you got to do it. Like if someone calls you and it's like there's a funeral and we can't say the mantras without you, that like you basically you got to like stop everything and do it according to the behest of the scriptures. And that's kind of what I mentioned, the Agori, that like in legend they're just like weird cannibals, but from some sort of understanding that there is the worst karma that could possibly happen is when there's a dead body that hasn't had the proper death rituals, that for whatever reason of all the bad karmatic things that could happen, that basically puts the karma of death into the world when you have dead bodies that haven't been properly cared for after death. So you have to have, so in the Torah, there's actually laws about it. Like if you're going down the path and you see a dead body, you're required to take care of it. And even priests, that you usually shouldn't deal with dead bodies because it defiles them, that they can't serve in the temple. But even in some cases, a priest would have to defile himself to care for a dead body. So I mean, this concept to the creation of a special caste of people that care for the dead, and then the mythology of who these people are, and so it's
a noble cause. It's a noble cause. That's the thing. It's like when do we see like dead bodies around? It's like usually in the worst of times, during times of war, during times of plague. That's you just see that happening. It's like, well, we don't want bodies piling up in the streets. I mean, that's something that I think the vast majority of people tend to agree with. And the sheer fact that there is a particular group of folks out there that are tending to folks, because like you said, it's like if all of a sudden you just see all like the rich folks, if they're getting taken care of, it's like, well, what about like your average common human being there? It's like, especially when it comes down to something that's full of value and just respect, like the passing on. It's like new life coming in. It's like you're transitioning from this mortal coil to back into the universe. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of a beautiful yet sad thing.
Yeah, it's really why I'm developing the multiple truth hypothesis, because you could, on a utilitarian or just altruistic view versus a spiritual view, where you say like, no, like what you're saying is true, but that's not the reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it because the scripture says that really bad things happen to you after you die if you don't have this done to you. And so you could have you said like, that's not true. No, maybe you believe that, maybe you don't, versus what's actually written in the scripture. And then if you're talking about the theology of reincarnation or what happens to people after we die, and the role of these rituals in the benefit of the soul of the deceased. So that was more the theological way, although I might agree with memes. And you could have a utilitarian, secular, even general spiritualistic view, according to any standard of masonry or functioning society. Like, of course, someone has to take care of the dead, whether you believe that there's like a heaven or hell, or the actual rituals or rites have some sort of effect on the destination of the person's soul. Even if you don't believe that, you're still likely to so I say like the British, the crematoria in India were largely developed by the British, who just saw like this is these guys are Hindus. This is what they do when they die. They like to take their bodies to the Ganges and have them cremated, and it's a big mess. So basically the British tried to industrialize the process that would be in a way that the Hindus would still consider good enough for them to do their rituals, and in a way that would be like efficient and could be documented with death certificates and environmentally friendly, and they could even tax it and make money off of it.
Doovid, are you attempting to quantize karma?
Well, I would say like
because it sounds like because when I hear multiple truth hypothesis, as soon as you did that, my ears perked up because from what you're kind of describing, again, I've been listening to a lot of the Wolfram things. It's like I'm picturing like a hypergraph. It's like you're going through. Here might be the events, but at the same time, if you were to take some form of either a derivative of that graph, or maybe that graph is a derivative of something else, that basically you can almost try to find like a karmic. It's like, all right, maybe I didn't do the greatest thing here, but at this point now I'm here. Maybe this event can generate more karma or something, just because when you're trying to go through, it's like, is there one true answer, or are there basically could there be a number of different answers at a particular point in time?
Think about like a function which models the total suffering. Okay, call that S of H if you just want to count humanity's suffering. But if you want to go the whole hog, you could just look at, all the suffering and then see that as a function that is being minimized.
Yeah, and I mean, essentially that is what I'm trying to do. And I mentioned the dualist. The most important part of the multiple truth hypothesis is the ability to work within the dualistic spiritual physical realm. So you could operate the multiple truth hypothesis just at the physical realm, just in terms of how we understand science in the material realm to work. But I'm trying to develop, so to say, corresponding equations that would look into a dualistic process that would include things like karma and saying like, yeah, I mean, theoretically, something like reincarnation could possibly be solved in some sort of series of differential equations where all of the various factors of a person's karma coming together for some sort of post-death judgment about the destination of the soul, and that could somehow be represented in as a series of differential equations, or even like a graphical form that you would have some sort of sinks and sources, and the person's karma would be generalized, and there might be a few different options, and their karma would be in a general region, and they would fall into the closest sink that matched their karma, if that was like a reincarnation. And something like having the body purified in the Ganges, in theory, might completely purify a person's karma, that their karma was completely purified through the process. But however that factors in like if you're Jewish or something, that you have people saying Kaddish for you, that these things in a dualistic system, these things would fit into the equations, and the equations, like a Kabbalistic system, would have to correspond between events in the physical and the non-physical spiritual realms.
Well, I'd say that kind of happens. And again, it's just the opinion from some dude on the internet that's a physics enthusiast. But the more and more information I see, and the more I believe that is actually true. Because how are you going to measure these different things? It's just, in my mind, it's like when a person passes on, it's like, all right, you can go back to dust. You can go back to the earth. Perhaps you're cremated. Your energy, your information is still out there. So at some point or another, it's like, we're the children of stars. We're the children of just this universe going through so many different iterations, to the point where we're on a planet that happens to have a heavily iron core in different states, that happens to be spinning around a star of a particular size. Our planet was hit early on by an asteroid when we were a proto-Earth, and knocked off a chunk of a moon that happened to be providing tidal forces on a planet with water that just happened to have the enough composition.
It's all platitudes because saying the essential, because I'm saying, I don't know if you're a dualist, but I'm a dualist, and saying the essential you does not exist in the material realm. It's something from the spiritual realm. So yes, there's Doovid's body, Jennifer or Meme's body that is in a current place, like like Memes is saying. However, the essential you as a dualist resides to some extent within that material body that the platitudes that you said are true. However, that essential you is not actually part of the material realm. So I mean that's one of the main reasons for the multiple truth hypothesis, to be able to explain something complicated. So if Memes is kind of a materialist and he's saying like, no, the essential you in these spiritual phenomenon derive from material events, and you don't need some sort of separate spiritual realm where the true you exists, that's probably the majority opinion. But purposely I'm pushing back, and it's like no, my system, the proper understanding of Judaism, probably the proper understanding of Hinduism, is that the essential you does not dwell in the material realm. It is not a product of the material realm, and there's a different spiritual realm that controls these factors, and even Plato and the Republic and the Cave could really be interpreted in two type ways, where you have one singular unit that or as a dualistic system. So that's, I'm not sure if Memes, if you're not a dualist, but I mean, from what you're saying, you keep on pushing back to using material things to describe what you're saying, and that's why I'm pushing back on. So like, no, these phenomena do not exist in the material realms. They can't be described by material things. And mathematics in my system also is something of the spiritual realm. Mathematics does not exist in the material realm. It exists in the spiritual realm. And a tool like mathematics could be used to describe the workings of the interplay of the spiritual and material realms.
I'm just saying, I've watched some videos on the internet recently, and I'm kind of the mind right now that black holes, as they're sucking matter and maybe even space-time itself in, are actually transitioning that matter, frequency, energy, information, however you want to think to it, to maybe the extra, I don't know, 10 beyond the 3+1 dimensions of space-time that we're currently observing right now.
Are you just repeating an explanation for how the material produces a spiritual phenomenon?
Well, here's the thing.
Black holes are a
if you're just
material
talking about the
phenomenon.
forces,
Anything involving space is a material phenomenon. So you're just saying that you believe that these spiritual phenomenon are produced from material phenomenon?
I'm saying the heavens work in mysterious ways.
Yeah, but you don't need like black holes or anything for the heavens. You're talking a dualistic system. The heavens operate independent of the material reality. They're not dependent on the laws of space-time.
Oh, well, I mean,
or you're saying like, no, you think the laws of the spiritual realm are dependent on the laws of space-time.
Well, I mean, we always need somebody to have gone click.
Yeah, but so this is a key issue, and really everyone has argued it, from the ancient Greeks to Leibniz and Spinoza. Were essentially dualists. The algebra and the Cartesian coordinates of Descartes were partially developed to explain these spiritual concepts of dualism. And Leibniz had his own, we talked about the monads last week, but Leibniz was the most vehement of the complete independence of the spiritual and material realm, to just say if there's equations that it's the same equations that govern the material and spiritual realm. As a belief system, is I believe that the material and spiritual realm are separate. However, the equations that govern, there are equations that govern both realms. Leibniz's extreme opinion that there is nothing comparable between the material and spiritual realms, and the rules that govern the material realm are not the same as the rules that govern the spiritual realm. And then the problem of empiricism is, well, if that's the case, how can we know anything about the spiritual realm?
We'd need to find a coupling that we could actually connect. And that sounds to be the problem. Because right now, if you're talking about looking from outside the universe, at that point, you're the observer of the universe. I mean, I think by definition, that makes you God at that point. Again, I am not God, but I'm saying that any type of system that had a form of creation there. And I understand, like,
There's the I. The I. You are
no.
an I, and that I does not exist in the material realm. So that's the point. You do have insight.
Because you're not in the
into
material realm. You're outside of the material
is not
realm.
Material. When you say I, you're referring to something.
I'm referring to an individual. I'm referring to that individual that many may refer to as God. I'm not smart or wise enough to understand what or who God
I
is.
Exist in the material and spiritual realm.
Right.
However,
no, I mean, I believe that.
The I could be completely independent to the material realm, but at least you say, okay, no, I think the I includes something of the spiritual realm, and therefore through meditation or induction or revelation, that a person can have insight into the spiritual realm because I exist in the spiritual realm.
Well, I mean, we're all entangled. I mean,
That's
the thing. I don't think there's a point of disagreement here. It's like, again, I'm not wise enough. Do I know? It's like, I don't really know much of anything. It's just, I'm here right now talking with you all. I'm starting to take on some of your cadence, Doovid. Thank you so much for this, because just as explaining something. Well, this is the thing. We all learn from each other. It's like, I have my personal
I
experiences.
just want to say
Doovid
one thing, though. There's somebody in the chat saying we make enemies of all the guests. So I want to know, honestly, memes, are you feeling like we're being inhospitable?
Not at all.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a communication thing. It's like, I kind of feel like memes is the kind of guy who doesn't mind a little bit of the old verbal jousting. You know, one of the first things he did.
Oh, you mean a wee bit of banter? The sheer fact that somebody might not agree with everything that comes out of your mouth. How dare you disagree with somebody? Oh, my poor Fifis.
Yeah, exactly. So he's not like that. So it's like, I'm more the type to, like, I'll meet people where they're at. If somebody likes banter, like, yeah, I banter to whatever extent is possible for me to do that. But like, if somebody doesn't like that, I'm not going to, like, jump down their throat. But people come on the show and they say things that they really shouldn't. I'm not talking about you memes. I'm just generally the history of the show. People have seen it. They say things that indicate a complete lack of self-awareness. So it's unfair to ask me to endure your lack of self-awareness, right? So it's like, oh, you're so mean. It's like, well, was it mean of that person to come in and start verbal diarrheaing all over the show? Get a clue. So, yeah.
You mean have respect for where you are and don't necessarily come on in, metaphorically drop trow and take a crap on somebody's living room?
I would say look at it as having self-respect. Imagine your mom was watching the show. Would she want to see you say something so atrociously stupid? Someone who didn't want to insult you was forced to do it because of the ahimsa principle?
That's why I broadcast to Facebook, so my mom can watch.
Well, that's what I always think in the back of my head. It's like, okay, if you don't have a good relationship with your mom, just think of someone whose opinion does matter to you. Like, imagine they're watching all your content.
All I know is, at one point, I'm like, I will keep myself a secret. And then I realize I've screwed up far too many times. I can find myself. Everyone can find me, so I better learn to accept myself. And hey, we're here now.
Yeah, so when I was on Luke Ford this week, we had Claire on and her streaming partner, Pelu, and then Ricardo comes and just because it's relevant to Week in Review and trying to, even memes. We talk about maybe he's going to take part in our experiment here and we're going to turn him into an expert, a subject expert on dueling. You could become a...
It's fascinating. It is fascinating.
And appear on shows giving a presentation about dueling and, help with my theory and, Jennifer's teaching in general to, demonstrate how we'll be able to turn memes into a subject expert. What does it mean to be a subject expert? What type of time, study, commitment, and, is it possible with, reading, maybe a few articles, if interesting enough to read, maybe like 5-10 hours a week over a period of months, that in 3 months he could be, doing the streaming circuits, giving, with a stump speed presentation on dueling, talking about dueling, and, kind of like Vince or something is Noahide laws, that as e-personality, it's good to be a subject expert. So you have your workout videos, and I guess, if you do security, you're in good shape, you're making workout videos, but, is it just you kind of like documenting your workout, or how much is there a connection to your audience that you're just going to keep on posting your daily workout, as opposed to some sort of structure where you're helping other people to accomplish something, and you don't have to be doing them just to use the technology to document something only for yourself, or people who care enough about you to see the same thing day after day, versus turning somebody else into an expert. So that
I know. I'd just be using it as filler rather than having to post on multiple channels. I have been, but because before there is its own channel for that, because I had done the workout thing like a decade before, and this was before like Google had bought YouTube and everything, and you could actually like make money and everything there. So it's like I just started posting workout videos. I dropped like 50 pounds in 90 days because I stopped playing World of Warcraft. I'm like, oh, I should probably do something about my life. So I did that, and then I'm like, oh, all these people like emails, so and so followed you or joined, whatever. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So, but you didn't have a vector of actually like really monetizing, making a career out of it. So I just did the standard corporate thing. Went into corporate sales for about a decade. Made some decent money, and wasn't a big fan of my life.
Yeah. So I mean, if you like streaming, and so I would mention that so this guy Pelu comes on and Brundle comes on, and he just like, it was a pathetic troll. He was basically like, like making fun of the guy's stutter and borderline just like racist stuff for
ad hominem. Yeah.
Well, it was just, but he didn't have a lasting personality, and his personality deteriorates largely into trolling, to the point where it's like, what are you doing? Like you're just like trolling. You're just like being mean and picking on someone for no reason. I mean, maybe there's like a small audience of people that are laughing at your jokes or something like that, but like, and that's still a sustaining enough power for him to keep on going. He's gonna like, but it's like, and even Luke at this point, like he's in Hollywood. They probably like that stuff. That, I mean, like even said that, like Jerry Springer. That's what people want to see. Like intellectual conversation gets less viewers, but that's the point of like long-term streaming, to be a
I'd say it depends. I'd say it depends on who's involved, which does have a certain level of cult of personality, to be frank. But it also depends on what you're talking about, how involved the conversation is, and who knows about it, because there's so much stuff going on. Like even back in the day, I knew somebody, they had like 12 subscribers. They were putting out content on like issues that I'm looking at this little like 10, 12-minute video. I'm like, this is probably maybe a little bit below, but it reminded me of some of the classic BBC documentaries from back in the day. He hired a particular voice actress to do the voiceovers and everything. I'm looking at this quality content. I'm like, this poor person has like 12, maybe at 1.39 subscribers, and they just kind of walked away. I'm like, this is the type of person I would like to see like actually supported. Unfortunately, Doovid, kind of like, as you were saying, it's like there are certain areas where it's like people just like seeing bad things happen to folks that they don't like, and basically having folks just make fun of them. And it's not necessarily that they like just making fun of people. It's kind of schadenfreude. It's like, I don't like these people. When other folks are basically taking the quote-unquote piss out of them, it makes me feel good. The reason for that, well, I'd say that depends upon the individual and their own history and everything.
The value of being a subject expert, like I was saying, like like on Adam Green just debating Talmud good or bad, that's one of the most common debates in the West for thousands of years. Or like JF, who could revert to basically being a public professor of biology or Church of Entropy, just like a public math teacher, that have a useful value. I have knowledge, a value proposition that some people are going to find enough to keep me in the streaming game. And so memes, you got your channel, you're doing your promotion, and that was my recommendation, is you need to become a subject expert in something. Like, you just be like a guy in a personality, but to so to say, to get your foot in the door, to make yourself interesting. So just like, who is this guy that I should be interested in knowing something about? It's like, oh, he's the subject expert on dueling. And in terms of streaming, then you could make rounds, like, I mean, the old days made like the public space, but shows you come on and, like if you actually wrote a book or had a PowerPoint presentation, let alone just as a personality. And then over a period of time, you could become a subject expert on multiple issues to being, so to say, a pundit, where a person has an audience to largely hear them pontificate on current issues of value, or even e-guru, where people are going to, so to say, follow your rulings, that they're going to say that something complicated is happening, we don't know what to do, and we're basically going to follow, the advice of this e-guru who has, has subject expertise on multiple things, and could explain these things. But so I mentioned that to memes, and for one of the key factors of this show is this year is the science of expertise, that if he's enjoying coming on Week in Review and streaming with us, that we will turn memes in the next 3 months into a subject expert on dueling. And I mentioned to him why I said that was because dueling is actually extremely interesting, because dueling is, in terms of like Jennifer's interest, dueling is a big aspect of game theory, that there's whole branches and theories of game theory based on dueling, and also economics, that historically dueling was part of a person's credit score. And I mentioned that the Kabbalah and the history of the credit system, the subject that I'm interested in. And so you see this overlay into economics, that dueling had a function of verifying or a person's credit, and these lead to the current aspects of game theory. So I'm not sure if you looked at any of those articles I sent you, or Jennifer, if you're familiar with any of this stuff.
I do have the articles that you sent me. Which one did you want me to bring up?
Well, if you want to put them up for a visual, but I'm just saying that I don't even remember which. Some of them actually had like the charts in a good way to understand how to look at it, like a duel, and because they're usually very straightforward logic.
It adds an additional operation into the function of society at a point, or basically at any point. It's going to change the established games. And see, Doovid, like, when you brought that up, the sheer fact, I was unaware of the connection with like the merchants and trading and being involved with credit and everything. But that's one of those things. It's like, you want to be an honest person. It's like, well, you're an honest person. It's like, you should be honest, because if you're not honest, well, maybe that'll cost you your life.
Well, and just to explain it to the crowd, if Jennifer could bring it up, all the better for a visual. Let's say Memes wants to start a business, and for whatever reason he doesn't have savings, or it could be maybe anybody, and Jennifer decides to lend him $10,000, and a few months later the business fails and the money's gone. And so, as per the agreement, it was an investment, and if the business just failed, that's fine. But if he stole the money, if he squandered the money, then that would be problematic. And in this scenario, it's generally impossible to verify that if Jennifer invested money in Meme's business, and they're overseas, and she doesn't have a way to know whether he did everything right, and it shouldn't really affect his credit, because not all businesses work, or if he did something negligent or just stole the money, to which it should affect his credit, comes the role of the duel. So here you have this example, hypothetical example. Jennifer,
you have rug pulled me, Memes. I challenge you to a duel.
Yeah, I mean,
you have the right to. Jennifer has the right to demand satisfaction.
Well, I'll let Jennifer. I'll let you. The history and the pulling off the white glove and slapping the person. But to say that, there's a $10,000 investment in the business, and it's going to affect. We need a credit determination. Should you guys work in the future? And so Meme said, I did everything right. and circumstances were against me and my credit is still good. And Jennifer says, I don't believe that you did everything right. I think you squandered and misbehaved, and your credit should be shot. And so that could be settled in a duel. Memes are like, are you calling me a liar? You're saying I'm a liar? That I mishandled your money and purposely did something negligent that would have caused that money to be lost and it wasn't extending circumstances? I challenge you to a duel. And, so the honor there would, say be settle it. So, I really want my money back. I think you messed up. Or the person's would be like, no, you don't get your money back. That the duel would be the settling factor in terms like most duels weren't fought. And then you mentioned like before the advent of the gun, where duels were fought like on swords or fencing, where injury was much more likely than death. Once the gun came, death became much more likely. But historically, when duels were first used in credit, that the likelihood it would result in death was much smaller, and that would restore the credit. So, if there's this dispute over $10,000, they would duel it out. And and if it didn't involve death, it was someone would.
Was it really $10,000?
Well, just as an example.
Okay, that was a particular example here. No, because I remember hearing the same thing.
That's how it was directly related to credit,
right?
And it was part of your credit score. Like it would be checked, like to say that he was willing to duel over it, and the other person backed down, and that would be. Like you would still be able to get a loan, and it was actually like banks, like it had like your credit was still in good standing because you were willing to face the duel, and it was like your honor. Credit. I said it's a mystical concept that really comes from the Kabbalah, the way that our financial system works it. But it's like honor in Japan. Credit has to be backed by your willingness to duel, and a person. But obviously the corruption. So you have, thinking New York and all the hustlers, or people like, you call me a liar, because they're just good at fighting. So people are tough and they're good at fighting. So it's a good strategy to lie, and then when they get called out on their lie, to just challenge the other person to a duel because they're good at violence. And so that skews. And so the mathematics, it's an extremely well researched topic in mathematics with all types of crazy scenarios and thought experiments and either or decisions and rational actors. And that's why I thought like memes could probably even make some PowerPoints and be a subject expert presentation where you talk about duels, historic duels, the history of duels, the technology of duels. Like we do chess, my YouTube, the simultaneous in the Detroit Institute of Arts in the dueling room, where we have the section of the museum that has the dueling. We have Knights of Armor.
You have a dueling room?
Well, I volunteer chess coach at the Detroit Institute of Arts. So the big center room where we have our big chess events is the room where they have the dueling equipment, like the old swords, the old guns, and the body armor. So when they play chess and set it up, in the background are these old guns and swords and armor, and so it's actually like give the comparison of chess to like a duel. So it's pretty cool when we make our events at the Detroit Institute of Arts and have these big chess tournaments, that there's these actually some historical hundreds of years old dueling equipment. By saying dueling is a very exciting subject, so I said memes could probably become a decent streamer, popular streamer, if he had expertise in dueling, if he understood how to explain the aspect of game theory and could tell interesting anecdotes and stories, and even if you really like doing it over a period of years, you might develop your own collection of guns and swords yourself and show that stuff off.
So what you're saying is I should quantize dueling.
Well, so you should develop subject expertise in dueling, and that means the history of it.
Your understanding in a manner that indicates expertise.
Right. And my base reaction to that is like, okay, is that how what was it Alfred Nobel felt? It's like, yay, I've become extremely rich, and oh, my brother died. Oh, they thought it was me. Oh, they wrote my obituaries, Doctor Death dies. It's like, oh crap, because at that point I feel like I'm peddling death. But then I think back to part of the earlier conversation where I said, Doovid, is he in a way trying to quantize karma? It's like, all right, what would the weighting be for these particular situations? What would be the optimum route through here? So I'm thinking if I was going to apply this in also a game three theoretical approach, do we always need to have long swords till first blood, like some of those mercantile things did? Now, it's giving the example, it's okay, maybe you get a big, beefy, brutish person that's able to exact a lot of violence. Well, if they continue to put themselves in those positions under modern scenario, it's like you might be a big, strong dude, but a 45 to the chest is still a 45 to the chest because we've the increased velocity of violence here because a firearm is a force multiplier. So that's why it's like, okay, at that point, people are willing to die. How many people are willing to die in that fight? Or maybe, you know what, there was a heavy tip there. Maybe they don't necessarily want to die. Long swords till first blood, or even to continue all the way down the dueling spectrum, you know what? They're going to have a battle of the minds. They're going to go down to the dueling room and they're going to duel in a game of chess because it's the concept of honor. So, at what level and in what arena should that honor be defended in? And that is a very interesting concept. I'd never considered it necessarily in that framework.
Because it doesn't make sense without an honor system. Because it's always about judging, like, you know, who has the right to challenge who to a duel.
Yeah, I mean, the Vita's karmatic system have dueling as an aspect of dharma and conflict resolution, that sometimes conflict resolution cannot be resolved in any other way than a duel, and it's, you know, laid out in different texts, and you know, besides for the stories that included, also, you know, kind of the etiquette of how these things you know, go about. And a lot of times in, you know, like the Puranas, the good and bad guys are determined by, do they follow the proper etiquette or not.
Well, it also was set up so that it wasn't meant to be taken lightly because, at least in a lot of historical context, you'd also have seconds to the duel. And basically, those would be the individuals that would also be going there representing. They would meet before the actual duel, see if it could be resolved to that point. Because at that point, it's like, all right, especially back in the day, if you got shot, you're probably going to die. You might not die. You might survive for a while after, but we have lost founding fathers that way, or at least one, because at that point, it's, again, and Jen brings a very interesting point, what would qualify there? I think a lot of us, and again, we're always going to disagree, but I think the vast majority of folks, it would be like, you truly go out of your way, you're lying about somebody public in a very public.
No,
it's
you
a
need
blatant
a quick.
lie.
You need a quick. You need a heuristic. You've offended my honor, and I have a higher standing than you. Therefore, I have judged you to have offended my honor. Therefore, I can challenge you because my standing is higher than yours, according to this pre-existing social standing system. You need a quick thing. It's not just like, well, maybe someone. Obviously, both people's feelings were hurt in the exchange. We're well beyond feelings being hurt. Nobody gives a shit.
Well, the duel also has to be accepted.
Has the action led to? You got to look at civilization like a machine. Has the action of somebody led to a wrench being thrown into that machine? If yes, opens the door to possible justice.
Just a quiz here, maybe Aiken in the chat. Math and physics, famous duels. So an easy one, Tycho Brahe, right? There's some connection like Tycho Brahe and duels, right?
All I know about him is he had something to do with development of astronomy. I'm not aware of the duel's history, sorry.
I thought he was a character in The Expanse.
Tycho Brahe was, he might have been Dutch. He was aristocrat, very wealthy, and he had an observatory where Copernicus...
Oh, no, the station was called Tycho, sorry. Or Typho.
Yeah, Tycho Brahe was where Copernicus had studied under, and he was, you know, a nobleman who had a nice property and had an observatory, and for decades had been taking reasonably accurate records of the positions of stars and planets, and so that was, Copernicus at some point had got a start over it, but I'm not sure if anyone in the chat, but I'm pretty sure Tycho Brahe had a fake nose. That it was mentioned that Tycho Brahe, if anyone reads the story of he had a fake nose, and why did he have a fake nose, was because he lost his real nose dueling. No one's heard this story.
Oh, I don't.
I put it in 1566.
I
Tycho
feel I
left the
remember him.
study of University of Rostock. Here he studied with professors of medicine in the university's famous medical school and became interested in medical alchemy and botanical medicine. On 29th December 1566, at the age of 20, Tycho lost part of his nose in a sword duel with fellow Danish nobleman, his third cousin, Mandrup Parsberg. Two had drunkenly quarreled over who was the superior mathematician at an engagement party at the home of Professor Lucas Bachmeister on December 10th. Coming nearly to a quarrel with his cousin on 29th of December, they ended up resolving their feud with a duel in the dark. So it's famous.
Look at that mustache. That's freaking
2012,
fantastic.
researchers reported that the prosthetic was actually made of brass. So they actually have his artificial nose still exist. So he's saying, like, in mathematics, there's more. Like I remember just offhand that there are tons of stories. Like there were like mathematicians, physicists that like went back and forth to England and France, and like, or who died. Like there I forget who, but there who died in dueling, or the reason they were in France was because they had offended a noble person and who had challenged them to a duel, and therefore they had to flee the country. And Tycho Brahe is the only one I remember offhand, but I'm pretty sure there's like tens and tens
they got
of
challenged
stories
to
of famous characters
because they insulted their mathematics of each other. They were trying to figure out who was a better mathematician or something.
That's what Tycho Brahe lost his nose in a dispute over math, where the person challenged him to a duel over the ego of who the better mathematician was.
It still happens now. Look what happened with Brundlefly. He challenged me to a duel, and he lost.
Every schoolboy like press 1 if you've heard the story. Is like Doooovid the only person with a little bit, like, this is European history? Is that, like, did no one press 1 in the chat if anyone had heard the Tycho Brahe losing his nose in a duel story?
I remember him from astronomy now. At one point, they're like, oh, there was this dude, and I'm remembering it. Okay, he's got kind of a funny name, and he took all these measurements, and he did all this stuff, and he helped us build up a system, or at least just get observational data.
Well, he was the rich nobleman with the cool house and stuff,
and a brass nose.
Copernicus was the smart guy, but but Copernicus needed his observatory.
Copernicus was crashing at his pad.
So like Tycho Brahe is the character he's remembered as this rich dude who like at least he cared enough about science to use a little bit of his money to fund an observatory, but he's kind of like this Eric Weinstein type hubris character that got in an argument whoever knows mathematics better, and had his nose chopped off in a duel because of it. And like every schoolboy, that's one of the most famous dueling stories. I thought like every schoolboy learns the story of Tycho Brahe's fake nose.
I feel like if I run into Eric on Clubhouse again, I should ask him if we should legalize dueling. Because I asked his brother Brett. Friend Heather said, off the record, yes. In seriousness, no, it's probably a bad idea. But they both agreed there were people that they want to see dueled, I believe was their quote. It's bipartisan support. It's an interesting conversation. There is a lot of rich history. This is getting more and more interesting.
Well, yeah, it's the old pressure release valve. Civilization as a machine. Machine gets overheated. Pressure release valve. Machine keeps working as intended. So it's a linchpin of continuity of civilization.
We'll say if memes
don't
became the
disagree.
subject expert on dueling, you would be able to do a few things. One, you would be able to explain the history of dueling, its purpose. You might be able to lighten someone's understanding by explaining some like puzzle about game theory and dueling and how to look at the world in economics, and you would be able to tell interesting stories like about Tycho Brahe that would, oh, I know Tycho Brahe. Like your average person probably has heard that name before, and he's got a pretty funny anecdote about dueling, so that you could have a streaming, like that's already like
It's a very strong mimetic story, because at this point it's like, yeah, I kind of remember that from astronomy. It's like, yeah, he was the guy that basically helped give Copernicus the means by which to actually do his observations and everything. And he was running his mouth, got into an argument, and you know what? A rich dude actually, he lost his nose. He ended up getting blown off in a duel. People are like, whoa! It's like, you're saying even if you're rich, like, you might actually get what's coming to you, or at least hypothetically. I don't know the underlines of that argument.
So here's another mathematician that died in
I
a
just want to say
duel.
it's even more than that. It's like you don't really want a society where everybody is coveting the means of the rich people, because then you have a perpetual conflict because there's not enough to go around, right? So it makes sense if everybody can see that, yeah, being wealthy comes with this responsibility and all these risks, which may include having your nose chopped off in public. Anyway, I just wanted to say Tycho Brahe sacrificing his nose for math in his own personal honor. That's pretty metal.
Respect. Continue, Doovid.
Yeah, it was. I'm not sure if this one was over math. Évariste Galois. You ever heard of him?
He was a mathematician again to a duel.
Yeah, 1811 to 1832, and he's got the Galois theory of group theory. Maybe Jennifer has heard of that.
Sorry, I haven't. I never really did like a deep into history. I more just came at it from the perspective of what do people know about math and physics already, and learn the history associated with that. But I do appreciate these digressions. It always gives it more context.
Like Hamilton or something. So I mean, if you're, if you were like this streamer and be like, like explain the dueling dynamics of what happens in Hamilton or something. So you're the subject expert in a, something that like, oh, like I watched this in Hamilton and there's a duel in that, like, that you would be able to put into historical context, a deeper understanding, than a person would be like, wow, like now I know, so much more about, dueling, and, like you would use something like, Hamilton or, Tycho Brahe, like, something that they already know about and might want to learn more. And then you might develop your own little niche of people who really like dueling, and just love the stuff. And I mean, it was just a generic.
It's the combination of the game theoretical dynamics revolve with dueling. It's like, this is why we tend to observe these things versus like the historical context, which is more the flavor. And the thing is with the flavor, it's like, can you have too much? Sure, you can. But when you get that flavor just right, I mean, that's something that lasts.
Well, I mean, for your e-personality, you really need at least one or multiple areas of subject expertise, because you like, if your personality like there's a cult around me, and like you're getting in on a circle of awesome people, if that's even possible, to saying like, no, I mean, there's a value proposition, and you're not necessarily getting in, like you're not getting secret membership into some circle of elites. You're getting useful information, and maybe camaraderie and friendship. So like minimum you should have like one area of subject expertise where it's saying like, oh, what'd you really learn from that guy? And they tell you, well, no, like I really learned something from this person. He really gave over useful information because there is such a thing as expertise, and this person has expertise in this subject, and because I listened to their stream, now I have increased my abilities or my understanding of that subject.
Yeah, maybe make it clear to people that, like, if you're not on this same path, good for you, but you have to accept that your options for communication are pretty much restricted at that point, because we want to enable these people who are developing expertise. We don't want to allow people to come in and destroy that intention. And so if you aren't pursuing this, you should be asking questions, being curious, trying to get in the mindset of the learner, which most people are in the mindset of the teacher, which makes you look usually like a moron. So just please stop. Thank you for listening.
Well, so we assign you homework for the fun of it, and it's okay. Me and Jennifer are proactive people who take life very seriously. Care about things like wasting time, and think about karma. So we're trying to cultivate an audience of proactive people that would, in their spare time for fun, do something like research something and try to develop expertise in it.
God, I had so much homework.
Well, so that's a good thing. Even
No. I know it isn't. Well, it's interesting. It's fascinating. It's like
I'm saying, like multiple truth hypothesis as a mental technique, where memes comes to Doovid and saying there is so much homework, so much stuff I want to know. I heard you have this mental technique called the multiple truth hypothesis that could make it easier for me to become expert in more fields than it before I currently thought was possible.
Go on.
Well, I'm saying that's my angle of it. That's why I'm
no. I'm saying that is my issue. You gave me a lot of stuff. I'm trying to factor out how to prioritize it.
Or some, if you want to get into like the science of chunking theory, like maybe Aiken or something, could understand.
It's actually called chunking theory. That's freaking amazing. Love it.
Well, I mean, the mental construct of how expertise and how the mind works in general, that you have these memory or on the material realm, neural pathways.
Microtubules, bro. Microtubules. Go on.
That you have these templates of expertise that, so the studies on chess or something would be that like a grandmaster has 50,000 to 200,000 chunks in their head. But like if you're a musician, if you're an MMA fighter, if you're, yoga, you have your expertise becomes from you chunk things together. So in speed reading is the most basic, like a chunk in the beginning, a single unit where you have letters, that sword is a collector's piece. So to chunk it together, THAT, that SWORD, sword, that you don't have to do that. Your average person can just see that in one chunk, or even that sword in one chunk, or possibly even that sword is a collector's piece in one chunk. And so the expertise is determinative by the bigger size of the chunk. And largely it's because the evidence that short-term memory could only hold 7 plus or minus 2 objects in a time. So even the biggest experts, smartest minds are confined to this hard limit of mental processing power of short-term memory. So the difference in experts is not that they have more things in short-term memory, but we have bigger chunks in short-term memory. So really chunking theory is
it's like the
part of a solution to the hard
being
problem
able to
of consciousness.
Sorry. Yeah. It's basically, because I've heard something before about like you get more crystalline memory, and that as you're studying, you start to learn different things, and rather than necessarily have it be like a whole group within group theory, you're basically kind of chunking it. So it's like, all right, you see that sword, the sword. You're reading about something about like historic dueling matches and stuff. You just see that TH, and like with an SW there, you realize you're within a certain context, a certain framework. So rather than having to read that sword fully, you understand and can process that, so you can end up actually going through the material even faster.
Yeah, and it's related to things like athletics or any form of expertise. So it's very disputed, and there's almost no evidence that you could transfer expertise from one field to the other. And the fields, the theories of transfer of expertise are almost exclusively dependent on this chunking concept. So, if you want to talk something physical, like, Jennifer, the yoga instructor, that let's say that you have mastered yoga technique. I used to say this like in martial arts. If you have people coming to martial arts and someone's done yoga for 2 years before versus someone who hadn't, or someone done certain things, and then if you're the martial arts expert, you're gonna know how to help those persons transfer those skills in terms like yoga to martial arts, that a lot of the muscle memory could possibly be transferred. But most of the studies would be like in athletics, and something like football to baseball, like running, but most of the muscle memory that a baseball player has programmed into themselves wouldn't necessarily transfer at all to something like football. Something like the generic physique or physical abilities of the person might be useful in both fields, where something like mental, like mathematics is a general skill, like a curriculum in college, that mathematics is useful to all things. But that's the chunk, is like the discrete unit. What is the smallest discrete unit of skill, and how do those small discrete units of skill get put together for what's called expertise? And is there such a thing as general expertise, or is that not possible? And it's similar to the debates of general intelligence, but
that's a good question.
Unclear.
Like, I've been trying to think about what you're saying. Like, it's pretty clear that some types of expertise don't translate. So for them to generalize it to a science of expertise, you'd have to also sort of incorporate that there'd be no way to sidestep attributes of the learning process for certain types of expertise. But then it's like, I guess they're trying to answer the question of, can we generalize can we use language to generalize what it is that expertise is in a manner which is agnostic to the expertise itself?
Well, it sounds like you're working within a generalized move set there.
And in order to do that, we would need a unified model of how knowledge is acquired.
Yeah, so chunking theory is really, it's been proven in psychometric studies that these chunks likely exist from psychometrics, and it would appear to make sense with some sort of neural understanding of the brain, but no, I mean, it's completely dependent on a solution to the hard problem of consciousness, and things like expertise. And so, like, no, I mean, unfortunately, till we solve the hard problem of consciousness, you're unlikely to have comprehensive theory of expertise. But chunking theory is the current best working theory, and the reason for that is largely because the psychometric data matches the neural data, just like cognitive dissonance, where the psychometric clinical data matches the neurological data, where a lot of other theories there doesn't even appear to be a chance that the psychometric data would match the neurological data with the explanation.
Yeah, I would say that, like, biologically, we're starting with one thing, which is our subjective consciousness, and then we're dividing it into subsections, i.e. contrast detection. So light and dark would be, what section is it in? Light or dark section? So that's already a chunking, right? So that's a model that generalizes the action of the mind, because it's just generalized enough, because all it is you're taking a whole and dividing it into parts. And that's your basic approach for mathematics.
Well, my big thing.
systems.
Well, my big thing is I got to push back on Doovid a little bit there. I'd say it's like I feel like consciousness itself, that's harder to explain.
Think about it like this,
like the chunking phenomenon.
Consciousness is, the primary function of consciousness is to chunk between light and dark, i.e. detect contrast. So the chunker is differentiating between lightness and darkness. And that's the fundamental thing that we're doing, contrast detection. We've just gotten ultra good at it, right? That's why we have eyes and stuff.
Chunking, I went over this multiple times, but I mean, chunking is the most understanding for sense perception, specifically for vision. So if you look, like, you have Doovid on the screen here, and you have the bookshelf in the back, and like just a simple geometric representation for how your mind is going to determine a spatial conception for the area we reside in. and you could see like a shelf of books behind me, and maybe a shelf has like 40 books. So you could just have a chunk like, oh, there's a shelf of books, but this is Doovid's bookshelf. So I could see the bookshelf.
So we know he's got a lot of books.
Well, I was saying I've actually read those books, so maybe in my mind, so in Meme's mind, he can't even make out the title of those books. So he just has one chunk that is a geometric representation, like that looks like a bookshelf, and those look like books. But Doovid, my chunk includes, not only the title of the book, but a substantial amount of information, maybe even thousands, tens of thousands of concepts memorized from those books. But the most basic, like central sense perception of vision, like is it a curve or is it a straight line? And it's an information overload. So you're just going to chunk it that this is how I'm perceiving this shape. I'm making an estimate that this object has this shape and is a certain distance away from me. And in order to have a totality of perception, you have to have basically the 3D coordinates of the immediate area around you and all the important objects chunked. And if it's like short-term memory, you could only work with like 7 chunks at a time. So you're just like, oh, chunk a bunch of bookshelves in the background. And then if you actually want to look at a bookshelf, you would have to focus the vision because there's that hard limit of short-term memory. And so this process of chunking doesn't just explain like complicated things like becoming an expert. It explains the most basic thing of perception of vision.
Did you say there was 7 something?
The
7
maximum
plus or minus 2.
The maximum working things in short-term memory.
And how many rows of the periodic table are there?
Usually 7.
That's the microcanonical measurement limit. 3 times 2 plus 1.
Well, I mean,
the dualism.
Well, and this is psychometric. Whether there's some sort of physical reason.
Our minds are still subject to the laws of the universe, and this is the proof.
Memes is familiar with it. I've went over some of these studies where they first started determining, this universal concept of 7 items plus or minus 2 in short-term memory. But like anybody who's tried to, like a phone number, is probably knows the chunking phenomenon that you can remember something around 7 digits, but if you could chunk them together, you could remember more. So if you meet in certain devices to like attaching memories, certain techniques for quick transfer from things from short-term to long-term memory. So these psychometric, saying the measurement of output of the mind that could be measured, have been extremely well documented and studied, but they're not physical. They're psychometric recordings of what human minds are capable as observed from the outside, as opposed to a solution to the hard problem of consciousness, which is internal, complete explanation in something very complicated like expertise, where we're working with this hard concept that yes, there is, even though we don't have a physical representation for why it is, there does appear to be this hard limit of 7 items in working memory. However, the 7 items in working memory could be chunks, and those chunks could be of any size, that you could have chunks of, so it's like memes is a chunk. So memes could be one single chunk where it's just memes, but memes, it's like a prism or like I forget the right word, but like if you zoom in on memes, that one chunk of him could become infinite chunks. Like the one thing, his memory, all his stories, all the various aspects of them that, so in short-term memory, if I'm in a crowd of 7 people in a room and I could only focus on 7 objects at a time, so memes could just be one object as a whole, as where if I'm having a one-on-one conversation with memes, then, the short-term memory of memes might be, like dueling, education, and these various things. And if we, the 7 would keep on going to 7, that if we talk about dueling, then all 7 aspects of our short-term memory could all be focused on dueling. And in the mind of the expert, It's like a defragmentation where a person is extremely quick in going in and out in zooming from
The different dimensionality, the different folders, if you're talking about AI there. And when you're talking about 7, all I got to say is maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's divinity. I don't know. I just thought a lot of that chunking stuff might also be explained in part by like the Orrington reflex, which may or may not, now that I actually think about it, may have to do with the different microtubule networks, basically that resonant structure that's found within, essentially, as far as I know, all biological cells as well. So whether these different neural pathways, different sense-making functions, the ability to contrast, like Jen was saying there, I feel like once you've experienced some of those things so many different times, and especially depending on the resonance, like if it's like, oh my God, I nearly died within this particular situation, and in any type of similar consequence or circumstance, I'm going to have heightened awareness. I'm going to look, oh my God, there's a car. I'm going to make sure I'm on the sidewalk there. Even if I'm on the sidewalk, maybe I shouldn't have both my headphones on all the way. Maybe I should make sure I have some auditory information also coming if somebody happens to be swerving off the road rather than playing my music too loud. These are different external stimuli that I feel, depending on how often we come into contact with them, the circumstances by which we come in contact with them, I think this would also explain a lot of things. Because if you're studying and, okay, I'm reading a book, I'm gaining some knowledge. I happen to be a bit more of an auditory learner. So maybe while I'm at work, maybe I listen to some of the history of Tycho Brahe and everything, the situation that led up to that. Or maybe the situation with one of our founding fathers, Mr. Hamilton, as well. What's some of the history? What's some of the flavor that's going along with there, along with the underlying issues that happened before then? See if maybe we could kind of map those on to other things during different historical times, and then get up to today, see what the different circumstances were. Okay, we had the printing press, all of a sudden, this newspaper, this salacious article went around. Is that much different? Or if so, how different is that from a blue check mark saying something that might not be true about you on the internet? It's a fascinating subject.
You guys want to carry on? Should I take a break?
Yeah, we can talk some physics.
If you guys are going to go for like at least another hour or so, I'll take like a 10-minute break.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about what some people are talking about in the audience, because it is really interesting. Lambie, I don't know if you're still there. Lambie had a question about whether it's possible to do like an anti-gravity machine. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just not clear to me right now how you'd build it. And it does appear to be like a problem with the source. So you're basically talking about inverting the polarity of the gravity field. I'm not aware of how to do that. However, the behavior of the field near the 0 point energy, okay, because it's quantized, is going to have effects that seem, quote, strange, but they don't violate any causality laws, whereas anti-gravity kind of seems to do that. And then the other thing we were talking about in the chat is like, yeah, like this transcendence of the measurement limit. It's like the thing that ties everything together. So you can see it manifest in different things. It itself is sort of beyond visualization, because it's like, okay, like first there's space, then there's time, and then there's this abstract geometry and this real geometry. And it's like, what's tying it all together? Well, there's this measurement limit there. Maybe we can't fully transcend it as humans because it's just too abstract, because it's going like prior to time and space. And maybe we don't have the means to conceive of this, but we have this sort of pile of anecdotes, periodic table, 3+1 on our scale, which is really easy to verify. It's like, how many physical dimensions are there? It's like, no one's going to say anything other than 3, right? So it's just a question of like, what does that mean? Well, it's like, well, it's something that applies not just on this scale, but also on the micro scale. But on the micro scale, it applies totally differently, because I got 118 states, whereas on this scale, it appears that I have many states, maybe even infinity states. The Platonists thought there were 5 states, earth, fire, wind, water, etc. So yeah, that's I had a great chat with Memes. So I don't know if you were watching before when I mentioned it, but thanks again for having me, because that's really what I live for. And I'm not being facetious at all. It's it's great to have a chance to dialogue with people who are it's obvious they spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff already. Even if
We
they're
all like to
wrong, like
geek out.
it doesn't matter if they're wrong because it's like what are the chances anyone's right? There's a good chance I'm partially wrong because I'm just starting to use the theory now. So I could have overlooked something.
Well, you're smart enough. And what also gives me additional hope is it's like, all right, well, number one, the thing that always got me is why do we have like the laws of entropy, like laws of thermodynamics, like stuff like that? And then we have all these theories. At least when I was in school, I was taught it's like, all right, you have a hypothesis. Here's our guess. All right, we're going to do an experiment. If that is confirmed, and then we need to continue to test it. If it continues to be unfalsified at that point, it's a theory. And then once that's judged a certain extreme level of scrutiny, we're up there and we just know this is the case as far as we know, then it becomes a law. That's number one right there. That's one of the things that's kind of bothered me for a while. But as far as everything else goes, it's like I think we're getting closer and closer. And the thing that really gets me excited is I was watching something. I think wasn't from that long ago. I think it was within the past year from I think like one of the academies for advanced studies or something. And he was modeling like the theoretical limits of the mass of a neutron star. And apparently you can get up to additional masses and stuff if there is a certain level of angular momentum as well. Maybe it was reversed. Maybe because they were trying to figure out, it's like, all right, you can get up to about 2.8 with a certain level of angular momentum before it starts to collapse. And he has these models. I'm looking at these models, and it's like, once you get to this point there, it's like there's almost like this phase change. And I'm looking at this, and I remember looking at that thing about like the hyperbolic figure eight knot, and I'm like, well, I don't know, but if you were going to attempt to cut the most compact, efficient, closed manifold in all of reality, I'm like, judging by your models and how things are going with that exact mass and energy, I'd say that'd be the one way you could potentially like wreck space-time. And where does it go? In my opinion, into, I don't know, the wave functions of the other dimensions stuff. I feel like the universe is recycling itself via like singularities and stuff. Like once you get to
what do you
that
mean
point,
what do you mean by singularity? Because I really wanted like get
Gravity
to the bottom
well.
of this. Like, is this just a biological perceptual apparatus that like is impossible to avoid, or like are you alluding to something that I'm already familiar with? Because to me, a singularity is something that just doesn't exist.
well, and again, you have to say what a singularity is in our concept. And again, the model might be wrong, and there does seem to be some evidence to suggest this with some of these quote-unquote boson stars, which I'm like, wait, it's gravity, it's a wave, it's this and that. I'm like, a lot of this, I'm like, do we really know what's going on here? So, but at least in the concept of a black hole, what is a black hole? Does it go to another dimension? Does it go to other universes? My concept, my hypothesis, my random guess after watching some videos on the internet is, okay, at this point, what if we literally did punch a quote-unquote hole in space-time? And again, you need to prove all this math and everything, but essentially, where's it going?
Yeah, but what you want to think about is, why am I driven to contemplate these things for which there is no evidence? That's where you want to put your focus, not on these, things that are just going to cause you to burn out.
That's interesting.
You're chasing nothing. You're chasing fuck all. So now you got to ask yourself, why am I doing this?
That's fun.
Because you're not the only person I've seen do this. It's a psychology.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. It's like,
and if you're going to become a great scientist, what you need to do is, you don't want to destroy your own psychology. You want to think of your psychology as a trampoline that your ideas and knowledge are bouncing off of. So right now, if you lack awareness of your own psychology, your trampoline becomes rigid, and then knowledge landing on it might break it. But you want to just fully accept it. It's like, why am I doing this? Why am I so inclined towards this idea? And accept it about yourself, because it's not about getting rid of it, annihilating it, moving beyond it, anything like that. It's just about where you need to be psychologically to withstand the impact of revelation of this deeper knowledge.
Oh, I mean, I give it maybe half a sigma's chance of actually being right.
What being right?
Oh, what I'm proposing, it's like, and again, if
Okay, so
I were to
you're acknowledging the probability of it is negligible. Okay, so again, it's a psychological question. You have to change your stance rather than contemplating the data. You have to go to metadata stance. What is it in me that's driving me to be so obsessed with this notion of a singularity? Because I got to tell you, I never once thought of a singularity ever. I'm anti-singularity because it's like that's my test to know that something's wrong. Is if it generates a singularity, it can't possibly be right.
we're setting the bounds of essentially, in my opinion, transitioning from the standard 3 dimensions of space and our 1 dimension that we know of time
Well, then if
back
you want
into
to do
the
that,
energy
you don't want
of
to introduce, but you're introducing something that is going to be something you're going to trip over. So you're saying, why don't I put this booby trap in the middle of my thought process? I'm going to fall into a hole and just keep falling for all time because there's no end to the drivel, right? You can go on for all time. You will not necessarily reach higher knowledge if you pursue a line of inquisition to its quote, logical conclusions.
Are we actually talking about the discussion, or are you talking about my thought process?
I'm talking about your thought process. That's what this is all about. It's the conversations generally are supposed to be us discussing your thought process and me giving you tidbits of information to improve it. Not to change who you are fundamentally, but to actually bring out who you are fundamentally in a more balanced and healthy way so that you have a more stability, better memory. It's all about what can you take to the next life. You got a really tiny bag. Okay, we're sitting in a hotel. The hotel's on fire. We got to catch a boat. You're going to take us to the other end of the world. And you have a fucking makeup bag. And you're trying to fit a guitar in it. Not you. This is literally anybody who, when they start this. And I'm trying to talk you into leave yourself something in that bag, but don't try to fit a guitar in it.
How big is the bag?
Just random.
Yeah.
I bet these kind of like ramen instant noodle soup. So there's a kosher brand that is pretty popular all over the place called
They're good.
Called Tradition, and just like add water instant noodle soup, but it's in French and it's made in Quebec. So Doooovid is about to have a product from Quebec.
Oh, we got a mukbang.
And these are pretty popular. Like I think all over, for whatever reason, they make really good kosher instant soup in Quebec.
There's this awesome effect going on right now where it's like semi-translucent. Epic advertising.
It was adjusting its gauge. Adjusting its gauge of what was going on there. It was adjusting there.
I can't do anything about it. There's certain pixels that the software is going to register as clear. So I think it's like darker, maybe blue or something. So whatever on Bear Trap, if you look at that icon, you could see like moving water behind it. Anyway, minor digression.
Oh, okay. I was unaware of.
Yeah, the conversation usually kind of goes from super serious to minor digression to super serious, and over time you're looking to spend more time in the serious mode and less time in the jokey mode. But when you start, you're going to have whatever the inertia is in your mind, right? You think of yourself
I
like
feel it. I feel my mind
up.
being. No, I feel a slight throbbing, and I don't think it's just the nicotine.
You know those things you wind up dolls, right? So like you think of your total personal karma as the result of a huge wind up, that wind up being like the composite momentum of your successive lifetimes, right?
So what you're saying is I need to be the Energizer Bunny.
What does that mean?
It keeps going and going. It's a trope. It's supposed to be a wind-up toy, and then they put the Energizer battery on. It was a big commercial from like the 80s and 90s.
You can, use that as a metaphor for the inertia. So we have to make a conscious decision to go towards to like consciously change the conversation into something more abstract, because we sort of take into account that it's naturally by entropy going to drift towards familiar topics due to inertia. So it's both. It's entropy and inertia. There's the inertia from all your past karmas, and then there's the entropy of the fact that it's just fucking hard to talk about this shit because it's really abstract. You need like this super strong consciousness. So a lot of what we do is just regaining the focus. That because you can build up momentum in focus too, right? You can
What
build
if
up momentum in all the eigenstates of your consciousness, and that's kind of what's the practice is, like learning through your own through how you are when you start. What are the eigenstates you should be putting more energy into to balance yourself out, given the things about yourself whose effects you'd like to minimize?
now what if karma was entangled, entwined? I'm not even sure of the right word
Yeah,
to
it is.
use.
It's like a
with
giant.
the
Imagine
extra.
imagine the tightest wound up, tightest ball of all time, crunched infinitely times more. Because it's like, how much uh, flesh do you need to bind a light field? A lot. The light field wants to expand. Life, by virtue of containing a light field, life is very, very entangled. It's like a nugget, a tumor, if you will.
I prefer topological obstruction.
You are the topological obstruction. That's the thing.
That is true.
All you're doing is trailing your focus through various layers of the knot.
It sounds like chunking would make things a lot easier
So
to
you realize
comprehend.
that the knot is chunking in a, what do you call it, in a sort of subconscious way. So the knot, which is the ego, chunks. It has biological chunking. So it's just telling you what it's always shown you, which has led to you not being killed off by evolution to this point. Which, I call them tacit axioms. So in Buddhism, they would say, well, you're tacit. So you take like, Taoism, Zen Buddhism, stuff like that. It's like, we don't really exist. It's like, what the heck does that mean? It's this idea that, like, what is the I, right? Going back to that final chunker.
So it comes back to the eye.
Sorry, I had a better point in there. I just lost my train of thought. It's extremely hard to remain focused in this stuff. And that's kind of why I mentioned it before. Is like, yeah, it's just tough.
I mean, how dare you, Jennifer, not give a perfect explanation to why everything is the way it is?
So there's tacit axioms which come about through biology, which have to exist because it's what enabled your survival. But those axioms they don't reflect objective reality. They reflect something about objective reality, but not objective reality itself.
Now when you say objective reality, are you talking about like our actual,
that which exists outside, like that which is there, whether or not we are?
Oh, well, I don't think that we actually really have the capacity, at least at the moment, to really see absolutely everything there.
Well, again, I feel like idea. You have no idea if you do, or you don't know if you do or don't.
That's an interesting question.
What you can say is that because the universe is infinite and subjective consciousness is finite, and I know it's finite because I have a finite body and there's conservation of energy, right? So it's not possible for that finite to identify with the infinity in the sense that there's no transform function between finite and infinite, right? So we can't get to infinity, but we can understand the nature of infinity to whatever extent is possible within subjectivity. And right now you don't know what that is. It may be a little bit, it may be a lot. We have no way of actually knowing what percent because that's the part we can't know, right?
I say at this time, because whether or not we actually have the means, I just don't know of anybody that has actually achieved that at this moment. I mean, my gut-based reaction is karma, soul, your essence, whatever you want to think of that as. I tend to think that as we transcend to whatever other planes of existence there are, I feel like any of that energy or information, it basically just goes back to the other dimensions, basically outside of the 3+1 dimensions of space and time we have here. And I tend to feel
there's nothing outside that. So it's like, why are you trying to bring us back to extra real physical, like metaphysical constructs?
I'm to be fair, I'm not sure if what I'm saying is true. Maybe that goes somewhere else. But my general analogy for this is, well, if matter ends up falling into things that we view as singularities, as far as at least many people are saying right now, I'm
Well, of
saying
course
that
they're saying that a singularity is a way to cheat at logic. If a singularity is true, anything is true. So you're never going to be a scientist if you're chasing singularities.
the thing that has brought this a bit into more and more focus, because I was becoming a lot more skeptical of black holes for a while now, was the fact that apparently on one of Professor Keating's things said, basically when they were attempting to either separate or try to pull off a quark from like a proton there, at one point they said they end up getting like another series of quarks to come out. I'm like, wait. So they were extracting fermions from literally nothing. In my mind, I'm like, all right, if you have these additional dimensions of energy that we're not technically perceiving because of like whether it's measurement issues that we're running into currently or something like that, you're literally pulling out matter from the energy within additional dimensions. And like, well, how would those get replenished? And my thought would be, well, if you're sucking in space and time and matter and stuff into somewhere that we don't know where it goes, what if it's just replenishing those
And
dimensions?
what I'm telling you is that that's a device
the universe
effect.
just recycles.
That's a device effect, not a matter effect. Period. And you want to say it's the matter and not the device, and I'm going to say
I don't know what it is.
And until you can until these people can satisfy the burden of proof, which they can't because their work's all theoretical, why would I learn it? Why would I tarnish the pearl of my wisdom with such trash?
It's being willing to entertain an idea.
Why would I entertain an idea I know is destructive to my psychic peace, i.e. a singularity?
Might it lead us closer to the truth? I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's.
But I already
an idea.
have. That's the thing. I already know what the truth is.
What's the truth?
Of what? The truth is a complicated thing, you know. It manifests differently in different situations, but there are certain principles that operate under every situation, and those are called universal truths.
My universal truths are kind of trolls, but I feel like they're useful.
And the universal truths that I accept are karma and existence.
Those are good ones.
So everything I know is happening within those things. So now you're saying maybe something doesn't exist but has karma, or something exists that doesn't have karma. And I'm saying no.
I'm just saying karma might actually be
You
part of.
can't establish that that belief is worth more than fuck all. You can't establish that it's a good belief, a neutral belief, or a bad belief, yet you're obsessed with it, which suggests to me it's a psychological issue that you need to look at rather than continually trying to talk about singularities. It's like you're leaving physics. The minute you invoke a singularity, you're outside of physics, you're into religion.
When I say singularity, what do you think I mean by that?
A region where the laws of physics are suspended.
Are they?
Is such a region possible? No.
I mean, isn't it just following like the hyperbolic?
If such a region were possible, then physics wouldn't be possible.
There couldn't be a hyperbolic vortex?
You know, these words. Listen to these words. It's so foolish. Hyperbolic vortex. What does that even mean?
That was basically one of the underlying things in, was it Thad Rogers, who was studying the hyperbolic figure eight knot there. That was one of the principles he used, which, okay, maybe they didn't say the word singularity there, but at least as far as coming up with like the fundamental particles, and it kind of actually, in a way, like steel-manned, I guess, at least in my opinion, what you were saying about like the proton being like a fundamental building block there. Just because every time they try to like separate it, it's like, all right, we think there's three things there, but I'm like, if you're going by like the simplest manifold type structure, I'm like, if you were to pelt a proton with something and the inside basically was kind of like a hyperbolic figure eight knot, it would kind of appear like, oh, you got three quarks here.
It is some sort of mental illness.
That's a given.
Well, the question is, do you want to persist in mental illness, or do you want to know what physics is? Because if you want to pursue these things, you're into religion. These people are not scientists. It's obvious. Like, I hate to say that Weinstein's the one that makes this obvious, but he is. Would anybody want to hear me bitch about all the horrible things that have happened to me in this life? Why does Weinstein get to kvetch about all the, he's been so hard done by, and everybody gives him an audience? But what about me? What about my plight? So it's just it's a bit distorted. It's like, science, you got to be objective. This isn't objective.
Right. Well, it's conceptual.
You mean subjective?
Well, it could be. I have no evidence to support this. It's an idea. Could there be a way to calculate it? I mean, probably, maybe.
Yeah. So you want to speculate about physics? It's like, who are you to speculate about physics?
Some dude on the internet.
Well, seriously, like, so am I. I'm just some dudette on the internet too. But what gives me the right to speculate about physics?
You've studied physics,
right? So why can't you accede to my opinions?
I'm not saying you're wrong.
But you're invoking a singularity.
Well, we don't necessarily know that's wrong.
I'm telling you, physics is impossible by definition if you include singularities. Why don't you agree with my assessment of that?
Because haven't very smart people that have done physics before say the same thing?
But how do you I say they are dumb. If they're positing singularities, they're priests, not physicists, first of all. That aside, even if they're priests, it's a bad idea because it ain't true.
If I said space hole, would that make you feel better?
No, you can't wallpaper around this. You either obey logic and you can do science, maybe, if you're good, or you deny logic and then you're doing non-science.
Can I not entertain these two things at the same idea? Same time? Words?
You want to muddy the waters. You want to distort the boundary. The only reason the thing has legitimacy is because it enforces strict boundaries, however. So you're saying, I'm going to go and undermine the boundary of the reason it's good because maybe it's not too bad that I do this. It's like you have no evidence that it's not bad, but you're still wanting to do it.
I'm just looking at if there is evidence that you can literally pull matter out of almost nothing, literally the quote-unquote ether, if you would. This would seem like the opposite.
Nothing. They're not pulling matter out of nothing. They're using gigantic high-energy machines. That's not nothing.
So it's coming from the energy that's being put into that particular experiment.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, how do you know? How do you know that it's not just a measurement device effect, an actual particle effect? Answer: you can't, because of your own fucking conceptualization of quantum field theory.
What's my conceptualization?
No, well, not yours. I'm speaking to the West as a single unit. I'm saying this is the way the West has understood quantum mechanics. They have said that observation and waveform reduction are equivalent. If you hold that, what I say is true.
Wait, are observation and waveform equivalent?
I said observation and waveform reduction are equivalent.
Okay.
If that's true,
we perturb.
If that's true, there's no way to know whether these, quote, extra fundamental particles that are discovered through these high energy systems are anything more than effects of the measurement devices themselves.
Could just be a phase change of the particle.
Yeah, exactly. It could be. It's speculation. It's like, why are, it's like, do you understand where I'm coming from here?
No, I'm just curious. No, because even Dr. Weinstein says that, oh, well, I don't believe singularities exist. I don't believe black holes exist. I'm curious why, because again, like, I do have skepticism, but it's just when I hear these things, I'm like, all right.
Well, why should they exist? Switch the burden of proof. Why should they exist?
Because of the Einstein math. This is a solution.
Who gives a fuck what Einstein did? He was a plagiarist.
Was he?
It's well established that Einstein is a notorious.
How much did he? Well, I mean, he worked with because he was the physicist, and didn't he have
Let's
the
not
mathematician guy
go
that
down that
actually did a
road
lot of
too
the?
much, but let's just say that I didn't need to invoke anything from Einstein's stuff to prove my theory. And in the meantime, people have done research on, quote, energy globules or whatever the hell they're calling them. And it turns out that it makes the same exact predictions as the Einstein equations. So guess what that means? You don't need the Einstein equations anymore because you have a way simpler theory that makes the exact same predictions. Science says,
that was what you were
bye,
telling.
Einstein. That's what science says. Yet you still want to talk about Einstein all the time. And it's like, this isn't science. This is like rhetoric, political rhetoric here.
Well, I mean, a lot of it does sound like virtue signaling to an extent, because I do kind of one of those same things, maybe not in quite such harsh terms. And Doovid has his noodles, and he's very happy. They look good. He's excited.
Tradition.
Exactly.
Don't forget about tradition.
I get the Quebec noodles. So, okay, Jennifer, you are very impassioned about this, because I am curious, because you said
Because
something about the periodic table.
I want you to have the same peace and joy that I do. And I know that beliefs are what ultimately cause thoughts and feelings and everything else. And I was saying, first, so long as you believe these things, which are wrong, you're causing yourself a tremendous amount of torment.
Well, I also don't know if the alternatives are correct. As somebody that at least founded skepticskill.com, it's like, well, I got to be skeptical, because that's like, I got to be willing to entertain an idea.
Here's a question.
That's
Are
rule
you
number one.
skeptical of skepticism itself?
Of course. You can use it to suspect just about anything.
Well, go ahead. Be skeptical of skepticism then.
Okay, you can basically just continue to ask questions to basically boil an idea down into just the most rudimentary, silly parts to try to win an argument.
No, I'm telling you, you have to be skeptical about skepticism.
Oh.
Meaning you need to tell me when skepticism is wrong.
Because
otherwise you don't transcend skepticism, do you?
Or say skepticism, if you say, is an estimate of the truth value of a given proposition or
I'm having
subject.
such a hard time with this language, but I think I'm starting to get it, your perspective, Doovid, here. Because you're talking about the truth function, and I'm like always thinking like, well, can we even get to the truth? But it's like, no, it doesn't matter, but it's what's perceived, as like
the observer.
It's almost like like a subconscious thing, an animal level instinct of when someone's lying to you, maybe.
So you have to make an estimate. So say the human body, like determining objects when you're moving and you're determining three dimensional objects so that you could walk without bumping into things to control the body. You have assumptions, estimations that hopefully are accurate enough that the body successfully moves and does what you want it to do. To all processes like that, where you're going to have certain patterns that are inaccurate, they're estimates, but they functionally allow the result, even though they're estimates. And the computer programming or statistical methods, however you want to go about it, like I call it's a truth function, and any proposition, any object is subject to a truth function, where you could use a statistical method to estimate what it is. And so mathematically, like, is skepticism, a truth function of 5% or 23%? Is it a threshold where you're saying that, skepticism in general is just saying like, no, all propositions are going to be subject to the truth function, that there is no 100% provable facts. So truth really is, a function. It's a range somewhere between 0 and 1, and that's all it is.
Well, I'd say it also comes down to just what it's like.
It's
a
not
mental
0 or 1.
You're saying
it's not 0 or 1. It's a range between 0 and 1.
You're saying it's 0, 1 with soft brackets, as in it doesn't include the extrema.
Well, I'm saying truth is the exact opposite. Everyone thinks that truth is 0 or 1 binary. So Doovid is saying that no, truth is not 0 or 1 binary. Truth is never, or maybe theoretically it's possible, but truth is basically never 0 or 1. Truth is a value somewhere between 0 and 1.
How do you have all the infinite
and that
factors
value
waiting?
of truth changes over time due to various factors. So the vast majority of people have some assumption that like truth is a binary 0 or 1. And so, multiple truth hypothesis, Doooovid is coming here to allow you to free your mind and perceive the world better by understanding that no, truth is not 0 or 1. Truth is a value that fluctuates somewhere between 0 and 1.
Well, that's I think that explains why we don't. A lot of folks
Maybe the
don't agree
sum
on
total
everything.
of all truths equals 1. So there's this thing,
Oh.
the sum total of all truths equals 1. So if you have something that say that it's converging, that there's going to only be one truth that's 99.999 percent, that this is going to be the truth. That's still true. It's not 1. It's somewhere between 0 and 1, and it at best approaches 1 and never reaches it. And so you're going to always have the infinite set of other possibilities. And even if all of the infinite possibilities have basically been reduced to 0, truth is never going to be 1.
Well, that's the thing. It's like we're perfectly imperfect creatures. It's like we only have so many measurement tools. We can only do so much there. But then again, we can try to do the best we can to achieve a more perfect knowledge and understanding of our universe. Why? Well, because
let me just clarify that. They're saying truth is 1. So the sum total of all of the truth values will equal 1. So if one truth converges to being like 99.99, infinite percent likely, there's still going to be the infinite set of other possibilities that are basically zeroed out. And so the sum total of the 1 would not just be the one option that is 99% true of being the truth. It would be the whole set.
The entire infinity
option.
Group.
Yeah.
No, I hear you on that. It's just in order to actually apply it in what's going on here, and I believe what was it? Aiken was talking about there, and again, this is in my personal interest that I was arguing over, and I'm going to trigger Jen again here, so I apologize. But I do remember them saying something about conserving angular momentum and spin, and could there be something very funky going on here? And that's why I'm entertaining it as an idea. Am I stating it as this is what I know to be the truth? No, but it would be a very interesting model that may explain things. So that's why I'm willing to entertain it. I'm attempting to do this in good faith while not trying to preach upon other people. Oh my God, this is exactly what's going on. I just think it would be cool there.
Is it good faith to promote a theory that has basically stalled the progress of science for over 100 years now?
Well, I'm here to listen to you as well because I want to hear competing perspectives. And
well, what I'm saying is, at what point does it get just rejected? Like, at what point do people just say, "No, this is just not science"?
Do you have an explanation for like kind of what's going on there?
I already gave it.
Okay. I don't remember.
Whatever they can delude themselves into existing through these high energy machines are machine effects, not particle effects.
So you're saying it's based upon the observational equipment?
What I'm saying is this: a giant penis prosthesis to make it look like yours is the biggest, to find something that no one else did. But guess what? You're looking and you're reading the entrails of your own ejaculate.
Are you saying that our technology that we've really developed in its current form over the past, I don't know, maybe 50 or 100 years,
is a giant fleshlight? Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Precise enough to actually take accurate measurements from like 5 to 6 billion light years across the universe?
What I'm saying is that what you're seeing is interpreted by a human.
Yeah, well, and our equipment.
With this standard model, you're trying to make the data fit the model. You're not trying to make the model fit the data. So that's not science.
Go on.
Period. That's the end of the story. So it's like, it's not science. So we shouldn't talk about it because we don't want to pursue stuff that's not science and call it science, because then we're just deluding ourselves.
The thing that gives a great amount of credence to what you're saying, and I could totally believe, is the sheer fact that we're like, well, we've witnessed like these gravitational things. It's like, well, was it from a black hole? Maybe. Was it from a neutron star? Well, maybe. What's the difference? I mean, is it just observation? Is it because apparently
It's
something
not just
happens that turns?
observation. You have an observation device, which you then have to interpret the results of. The bottleneck is always at the human. It's always who's interpreting the results. And if the person has a bunch of speed bumps and booby traps in their thought process littered with false constructs, how the hell are they going to get any insight as to what that underlying mechanism of causality is?
And the sheer fact that we also very often only have what's been published as information, because very often if the observations come back that don't necessarily match certain predictions, some of that might not get published. So that particular data, that measurement isn't even being incorporated into like the scientific knowledge base there, which somebody else that might be studying something, maybe not the exact same, but similar, could actually use that data as part of a model to help improve their model. So it's like, I tend to be of the mind that I think that most information should typically be
Oh, that's the thing.
free.
You're saying, well, it may improve the model. It's like, prove that assertion. You can't, because the model's been stalled for 100 years for so long as people have been proffering these insane hypotheses. So it's like the mere virtue of saying this stuff is itself unscientific, because it's like you should only assert stuff if you have scientific evidence for it. You don't have evidence for singularity, because to have evidence for singularity would be to invalidate the scientific method.
This is very interesting.
What does the scientific method depend on? You said so before, you had a bad feeling about how it worked. Well, obviously there's a huge part of it missing, right? It's not just come up with some random model and then throw a bunch of shit at the wall and see what sticks. There's got to be more to it than that, right?
Well,
Why does it work? It works because we have a universe which is subject to cause and effect. Never has anything happened before where an effect was before its cause, because that is going against the definition of causality itself. It's the cause first, and then it's the effect. That's just intrinsic to definitions of the words. So that's the tacit axiom of science, is that there are causal mechanisms like gravity, and we can discover them. But if you want to introduce a singularity, you're saying, oh, maybe that's not true anymore. Well, if that's not true, then your ability to make models is also not true, because it's a domino effect. So Lambie asks, is there such a thing as a passive, non-interactive observation? Well, no. That's the whole idea, is that observation has to be something that happens between two things, because it means waveform reduction.
It's basically, all right, we try to measure this thing. What are we using? We're using an electron microscope. Okay, we're bombarding something with electrons. It's like, okay, we're hitting something with something else. There's energy associated. So even if maybe it very often doesn't make a very noticeable effect, but if you're dealing on certain scales, especially if you're trying to approach the quantum there, it's like, well, yeah, it's going to have an effect.
Well, we can look at the results of scanning tunneling microscopes and say, we can be reasonably confident here that the uncertainty effects did not destroy the, what's the word? I want to say fidelity, but that's the wrong word. The integrity of the system. Because we can look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's what my
no. What you're saying here is, when I go into the route of, okay, singularities do not exist, how would I explain at least some of what we view as the observational data there? In my mind,
there is no observational data that supports the existence.
You reject it, but I'm also trying to make our friends in the cosmological industry and profession, like, also give them like a little bit, at least propose something.
I'm sorry to say, but their whole thing is based on the Big Bang.
So
why do you think they don't have any answers? Because they have a singularity sitting in the middle of they have an energy sink, an infinite energy sink in the middle of a machine. Is that machine ever going to work?
Well, isn't that why they gave Roger Penrose like the Nobel Prize last year? Or this year? Because of the infinite cyclic cosmology and stuff, might be an additional, and again, maybe
how
rudimentary.
Predictable?
It's conceptually, and again, it's a conceptual framework that a lot of people seem to like, and I tend to think a lot of people also liked him, and they realize he's getting up there in his years. So I mean, and again, I don't know. But what I'm
It
thinking
became
of,
perhaps untenable as a belief.
well, I'm trying to give a pitch to explain the quote unquote event horizons. And again, this is just a thought that I had at one point, was what happens, because the first thing Professor Keating ever asked me is like, what would I like to see more of? I'm like, strange stars, because I watched a video on that. I found that very interesting. If you get matter to a certain pressure, density, and everything, where either the laws of physics don't apply, or maybe they're just applying in the way as intended, you hit a certain level of, I don't know, quote unquote, superconductivity for maybe space time itself. Might that explain like the event horizons and everything?
That doesn't
maybe that
even
could be a
make
part of the
sense.
machine.
Conductivity is defined within the confines of space and time. You can't have conductivity between, like, so it's like you're going, why? You're like, I have a really nice thing built. Why do you want to destroy it?
Well,
Why are you so antagonistic to truth?
Well, my name is the memes of destruction.
So you're not being skeptical of skepticism. So you're given something with tons of evidence. That's where you should drop skepticism. Because if you're not skeptical about skepticism, you're just basically the guy saying, well, maybe we live in a simulation. Do you ever think about that? Then nothing is true. Then the parameters of the simulation can be arbitrarily reset by an alien on its period who's having a bad day.
Are you having a bad day?
I'm trying to help you. And I'm sad because I see this belief and it's like you're doubling down on it. And it's like, why? Have you no self-control?
What will we need to observe? What tools would we need in order to continue? Because again, like, I understand you might be totally right. You have a lot of validation, and even in your model, I'm listening to a lot of other smart people, for whatever that's worth, and a lot of them always seem to be mentioning entropy. So I'm listening.
Yeah, why are they all talking about entropy? What's the answer? Because it's the thing that's missing from quantum theory. Because you're trying to do temporal symmetry. Well, it's pretty much the same if they're going backwards as forwards in time. Yeah, right. Entropy's married to time. Entropy isn't symmetric in any way. Entropy is a unilateral punch in the fucking face. And there you have it. You've been initiated into the Church of Entropy. How do we feel? How you doing, champ? Whew. He's still standing. Oh, he's got some real
I feel
here,
bad for
ladies and
Chandra
gentlemen.
Sekhar then. I feel bad for Chandra Sekhar if that's the case.
What do you mean?
The Chandra Sekhar limit.
What's that?
Isn't that where, like, stars collapse and become black holes, allegedly?
Oh, okay. Well,
wow, you never got the stories. Oh, wow, you did take a very axiomatic approach.
Oh, I know almost nothing. That's why I rely on people like you to help fill in the blanks, because why should I be the one who knows everything? I can't know everything. There's a finite number of things I can know.
But that's why I'm here talking to you.
Because then you give that, like, contextual stuff, the stuff that I never would have had time to get and have it actually mean anything.
Yeah, no, that's why I like talking to people, getting the different perspectives, the history, the flavor, if you would, along with what they actually know and have done, measured and predicted. Just put in a conceptual framework. I
changed genders upon reincarnation, so I'm pretty fucking great. If you're looking for achievements, I've got a pretty long list.
Sweet.
How'd you like to have that power?
I'm not sure I would, because then, well, I'd either feel guilty about
well, there's
how well
really
I had
nothing
it,
more
or
Chadley than transcending your dick as a channeling of your Chadliness, is there?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Are you still a man if you don't have a dick? That's the real question here. And I can answer questions like that, which is what's really special about my brand of knowledge, is that physics is just an applied form of my knowledge. My knowledge is even more fundamental. I don't want to say more fundamental than physics because that doesn't make sense within the axioms of physics, right? I have a different set of axiomatic knowledge, which I've applied to physics. So I'm not coming at this basically probably from the perspective of a vast majority of other people who are doing this. They're trying to pick out of a pile. They're trying to find basically needle in a haystack. And I have a flamethrower.
So we're gonna burn hay. Can I bring s'mores?
Yeah, I mean, the hay that you're burning is your own illusions, though. So it's going to involve realizing that those things that you believe it are false are attributes of your own ego, not attributes of the universe.
Well, my motto is break the meta. So I mean,
The thing is that
I'm down.
skepticism, obviously, in some sense, is a virtue, isn't it?
I can,
Because
but you can also use it in a very negative fashion. That's why, as Doovid was kind of saying, like it depends on, well, why are you doing this? You could try to conceptualize it, but we do also have our gut heuristic instincts as well.
well, we want to integrate all that because it's all information. So if we deny a stream of information, or just like, why would we do that? Oh,
Because we
thank you,
can.
Gilbert. Thank you very much, Gilbert. If you want to see me talk really going through the theory with people who are like on that level, check out the time I was on with Doovid on Root and Branch. Probably one of the better ones. Because the ones on JF, they were kind of cool to a point, but he really sort of wasn't open at a certain point to continuing the dialogue. Whereas with those guys, it was like, they didn't mind letting me flab to the end. And I think I really touched on some good points of the consciousness theory. So Root and Branch, I'm not sure what that one's called, but it's Doovid and I with the regular team. Welcome back, Doovid. And nice to see you, Master Beater. Always great when you tune into the show. You're a cool guy.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Everybody has their own story and everything, and we try to judge the best we can based upon our experience, our history, our stories, and everything. And everyone has their own drives and purposes. Do we always necessarily make them public? Sometimes. Do we always make everything public? Often not. It's like, why do we do that? Well, we all have our reasons.
Of course. I mean, you're exposing your underbelly and it's terrifying. So this is where the whole e-personality comes in. It's like, we don't want to have something traumatizing happening on the stream. And this stuff can traumatize people because if they're not ready to face whatever about themselves, yeah, it's upsetting. We've all seen people get upset. So that's not my goal here. My goal is just to support whatever direction you decide to go in, because I really don't like the idea of like forcing people to do stuff.
Yeah. Well,
even if I could, I wouldn't, because it's not like you're not actually going to change your belief if I quote force you.
Yeah. Well, nobody likes to be told what to do. That's the thing. It's like there are actually a lot of folks out there. If you go around, you're like, you have to do this, and especially if you do it in not a very nice tone, a lot of folks' base reaction is, I'm going to do the exact opposite of what you say because fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. I apologize for my copyright infringement.
Well, you just sort of
The Rage Against the Machine. I sold that one recently. My merchant list, Rage Against the Machine. That's one of the ones I sell.
Popular track. No, that was a lot of my generation growing up. It's like that was what people listened to. It's like, really? Are people having a hard time understanding why people just don't want to do what authority officials tell them to do? It's like, especially if there were some folks within the government that were literally lying to us. It's like, why'd you lie? Well, we didn't think you would do the right thing. I'm like, that's a terrible reason. Maybe it was the right reason. I don't know, but I'm just like, you've just burnt so much faith in like the established structures and everything. It's horrible. It bothers me so much. Like, if there's a secret and you don't need to tell because of some national security thing, because of all these political reasons, it's going to plunge the world into World War III. Okay, you can have an argument for that. When you're saying it's like, don't wear a face covering because it's not going to do a dang thing. It's like, really, really, really? And then you come around 60 days later and you're like, oh my God, everybody do this. It's like, no wonder people losing faith, and that just bothers me, and that's why I find myself getting away from politics a little bit and talking about like science and like happy things like this, and arguing
weekend
whether or not,
reviews
yeah, exactly.
and weekly honorary half Jew, Zach de la Rocha, Zachary Manuel de la Rocha, born in Long Beach, California, January 12, 1970, to Robert Beto de la Rocha and Olivia Lorien Carter. His father's Mexican American with some African and Sephardic Jewish heritage, and his mother was born to Manuel Garcia Urias, a Mexican American, and Olive Pearl Fleming, who is German and Irish heritage. So, Rage Against the Machine, famous half Jew.
Dude, I love that hair. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, no, it'd be interesting. No, I wouldn't mind talking to you, Jen, about your thing. You said something about the periodic table, doing derivations, and something about 7, and just, I don't know, seeing how these things kind of line up and everything. It's like I said, I'm open to listening, and especially if it's a good argument. It's like, okay, I haven't heard that argument before. It's like, is this plausible? Is this feasible? Is it likely? If it lines up, I'm like, all right, I'm willing to listen to other things, and did ask Professor Keating during one of his actual, I think, job lectures of the Zoom thing. It's like, well, he was talking about measuring things in galaxies far, far away. And I'm like, wait a second. So how well can we actually account for the distance, the rate at which these galaxies are going apart, the sheer fact that it appears, depending on where we are, maybe the universe itself is accelerating faster or slower as well, the spin from those things as well, like all these different variables, how well can we account for them? And he was honest. He's like, okay, yes, we are doing our best and everything here. But again, I'm like, when you're talking about things like, I don't know, like billions of light years away, it's like, that's pretty far. I mean, well, we have measurements that have lined up. I'm like, all right, now, do we know if these are the measurements, or just have we had a certain level of consistency and maybe we're off by a certain amount? I don't know. I'm willing to work within different functions.
The axioms are different.
Right.
The axioms for my approach involve 0 singularities. So the wouldn't ever come up, because it would imply that you had made a mistake.
Now, would you have... No, here's my thing, because I keep on hearing people say, like, well, you have the Einstein equations, and apparently there's more than one solution, and just apparently one solution does propose the concept of singularities, which a lot of folks have argued about before. And so under your way, and again, maybe you don't acknowledge that, and that's fine, but would you have a different solution to some of those equations?
Well, sure. I've got it on my blog. I've got your basic mechanism for how stars are formed. So everything is basically going to be something like that. And your vibrations in the gravity field, they will also be predicted by that. Because it's just a multi-body equation. It's just a multi-body problem of 2 local centers of mass that have fallen into each other's gravity fields but haven't merged yet. And you can predict how big those things would be based on the Pauli exclusion principle. This idea that there is a maximum density in the universe, and that all your weird effects are occurring when matter is approaching this maximum density. Because everything else is pretty straightforward, right? I mean, it's mostly just empty space. Nothing much to explain there, is there?
Well, this has got the old noggin a jog. And number one, do you feel that maybe utilizing the term oscillation maybe a better use for stating things within physics, because within oscillation you could actually include vibration along with basically kind of like when people are describing different wave functions as well, because you could describe a wave function via the oscillation. And just I feel like it might be a broader category to talk about things, because I feel like people kind of get a little confused at certain
How do you
points.
feel about waveform?
I feel
that's like general enough, right? Like form is extremely non-specific. All we're saying with form is that it's like geometry adjacent, but it's even more abstract than geometry, right? Because to have geometry, what do we need? Well, what axioms do we need? Just as a little mini test for fun here. What axioms do we need to instantiate geometry?
I mean, you need space.
Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need a couple of dimensions.
Right. So we need at least one spatial dimension.
We can have a line.
But our own investigation has revealed that there's no such thing as one dimension. Because dimensions are trinary entangled. Spatial dimensions are trinary entangled.
Did you just say trinary?
Yeah, they move, they permeate, they expand.
You just went up. Rate. You just went up 7 points.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, you got to visualize it in your head. Like imagine a dot and then the 3 XYZ axes emanating from the dot. So in nature, there are no lines, there are no axes, there is but a sphere. But we can, because we're, not ultra smart as we tend to be, we have to bring that higher dimensional shape down to a lower dimension. It's a bit easier to conceive of. There's limits to our own conceptualization, right? Because there's a measurement limit. There's some stuff we just can't visualize. And one of those things happens to be a singularity. Like if I try to imagine a singularity, I just can't.
And again, is it a fantastical concept? It totally is. I think it would be pretty cool. I entertain a model, and now you're building up a model in my head, and I'm like, okay. And again, this model might actually explain a lot in simpler fashion as well. Because at what point it's like, all right, what is a neutron star? Well, a neutron star, I don't know. It seems kind of like a proton in a way. It seems like a lot larger thing here. Essentially, yeah, you got a bunch of neutrons, but there are other things in there as well. Maybe it just converts to neutron. What happens when it hits a certain level of gravity? I don't know. Would our instruments even be able to necessarily pick this up as well? Maybe it's just not necessarily emitting anything that we can currently view as well. Have we tried listening as well? Maybe that's a better fashion to actually listen. And when we're listening, I don't know, a lot of folks seem confused of, is it a neutron star or is it a black hole? What's the difference? And when I start hearing very smart people going, well, we don't know, it's like, why is that the case? And then I go, and that kind of steel persons your argument there as well. And the sheer fact that, again, it's like we kind of keep on coming back to this sphere. Why does this seem to be a thing? And then again, I'm going to be a bit sacrilegious here, but in my mind, when that gentleman was running the simulation of like the 2 neutron stars coming together and some of the things that were happening there, I'm like, I don't know, the energy that's released there seems like a lot. Is that kind of what happens when, I don't know, like molecules start to merge when you start to have fusion? Because that sounds like fusion on the scale cosmic. I think it's a very pretty thing when it happens. You just don't want to be anywhere in the vicinity because it goes boom.
But is that really how it works?
Oh, I have no idea. It was just a pretty model.
Because like your model doesn't explain why all the planets in our solar system are approximately the same age. So it's like, if it can't even do that, that's pretty pathetic. So why do you care about it? That's where I'm coming from.
Oh, I wasn't sure if that was kind of related there. I just assumed our planets were around the same age because we were kind of born around the same time.
Well, the current model says that accretion is how planets are formed, i.e. a bunch of dust builds up over time. What sense does that make if every planet is measured to be the same age within error bounds?
I just assume we were the children of like other stars from like supernovas and other material that was ejected that kind of accumulated, and then we had a star.
No, we were shot out of the sun like a chicken lays an egg at the speed of light.
You're saying the sun already went boom?
I'm saying the sun was the result of a boom emanating from a hyperdense region, and the proof of the boom is the fact that the sun exists because it was quantum state excluded from a hyperdense region, and then it was excluding so much that it began to also exclude from its own centroid, which was the resulting shitting out of the planets, which is why they're all measured to be the same age, because their space temporal waveforms were instantiated in the same instant.
But the sun is quantum.
Everything's quantum, dude. That's what I'm saying. Like you gotta look at it the way that it is.
Now, when you were describing the sun there, yes, okay, everything is quantum. Well, maybe except gravity. Well, maybe it is. I don't know.
I just showed you how quantum gravity works, dude. That is the mechanism of quantum gravity. And the reason why it wasn't solved before is because they didn't integrate entropy. All I'm doing is saying, well, what's the maximum entropy state? Okay, now the state variables are changing. Since the state variables change, there's a new maximum entropy state, right? Like think about it. In free space, the maximum entropy state for a neutron is a decay into a proton and an electron. But if you go to a hyperdense region, it's much more, it conforms more to that region if it fuses back into a neutron. It's all about minimizing the net effect that the universe has on the system. So when there's no pressure, well, it just pops out. But when there is pressure, it sucks back in because it's a bilateral phase transition. It can go in both directions, and what predicts which direction it's going to go in are the state variables, like when you do things in thermodynamics. So all I had to do was think, well, okay, there's a limit to density, and gravity is unlimited because there's, for all intents and purposes, infinite mass. So finite density plus infinite mass equals instances of quantum state exclusion, because quantum state exclusion is what enforces the law of maximum density. The existence of a state of maximum density, sorry.
So the sun was here before the solar system. It happened to kind of survive.
It's more than that. It's more than that. Think about the ambient space. Think about the space between here and Uranus. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. It's just,
Gotcha.
I try to do student-centered learning. So think about that space, though, between the sun and Pluto. That didn't exist before the sun did. That space was created when the sun was. That's why it's same with the time. Notice how the time and the space were created at the same time? The mass that constitutes them existed before, so it's not true creation, but it's a very fundamental type of transmutation.
So the space was an effect from a phase change.
The space expanded.
The space was a byproduct. Okay.
The space was created when the sun was ejected, which happened because of a too much gravity situation. I have a diagram of it up right now.
So there was a colloquial supernova. Sun was ejected, and then the sun as well.
No, it's just a region. You don't want to visualize it as anything, because remember, geometry doesn't exist at the pre-causal level, right? So you don't want to impose a geometry on it. It's just the hyperdense region. So we're not imposing geometry, we're only imposing qualities. So what qualities does it have? Here, I'll give an example. Dark. As black as night. What are some more qualities?
I mean, it would be the contrast between those.
Cold, right? Why does it have to be cold?
It's the lack of energy.
And why is there a lack of energy?
Well, because something hasn't acted upon it, entropy.
Because entropy dissipates all energetic differentials. Those are the same thing. The dissipation of an energetic differential and the increase of entropy, that's the same thing.
Okay. No, you're developing it from core axioms.
Always has to be that way, because you have to be ultra comfortable. You have to be sitting in a gigantic throne made of platinum iridium alloy, right? You don't want to be on some sticks. So every single one, it's like I don't go a step further in the logic process unless I'm like totally like that sure. And it's that level of certainty that allows you to have so much success in things like the Gauss theorem, right? It's only because I understand the axioms very specifically that I can then apply them to the Gauss theorem and things like that. And that can be done with anything that's valid. We'll have a way to predict it using this formalism.
It's memetically, that's actually very interesting, just because I've always wondered, because I've been paying attention at least a year or so ago. It's like, all right, you have these rare metals. It's like gold. It's like $1,600 an ounce at one point. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less, whatever. But I remember at the time, I'm like, platinum's a rarer metal. Why is it only $900? And I'm like, all right, this seems to be a rarer thing. You think it'd be more, but just memetically, it's like a lot of the arguments right now. It's like you got the wham bang, you got the pizzazz, you got the mind of God.
What's the least reactive element?
Iron.
Isn't gold less reactive than iron? Doesn't iron form rust pretty dang quickly?
Okay, reactive. You are correct.
Well, that's why it's special.
I was thinking it's stable. Oh.
Of all the metals, it has minimum chemical energetic potential.
Okay. We also use it in a bunch of stuff, and it's pretty.
So you think of them, what constitutes matter? It's just protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? But this one array is inert, and that means that the energy it contains is not available for things like chemical reactions. So it has a tremendous amount of internal energy, inaccessible internal energy. That's why it's like, ooh, shiny rock's pretty. That's a meme for a reason. And I don't think anything else is as unreactive as gold. It sort of stands out in that sense. I know it also has a rich human history, blah, blah, blah. And, I would say that if platinum were as abundant as gold, we probably would view platinum the way we view gold. So there is a certain connection to, like, historically, I don't know how much you know about the history of gold, commerce, but it used to be something you could find, right?
Well, no, people went out hunting for gold and everything.
Well,
you
can still pan for gold. And so you got to imagine how much panning's already happened. If you can still do it now, it must have been way more abundant back then. So my point is that the history of gold is partially about that specialness, that entropic specialness, but also about abundance, right? Because we're existing where we're existing, we're making do with what we have, right? So that rich history wouldn't be there without the abundance. If you look at it, like, I think it's they call it they don't call it doré, they call it something else, or no, it's like the alloy of silver and gold. You know what that's called?
I just find it interesting.
It used to occur naturally, like people, you just pick it up and then take it and melt it down and stuff and make coins, like Greek stuff.
I think I'm dozing off here. Maybe I'm gonna call it a wraps here, but if you want to continue, feel free. I guess I covered everything I wanted to cover, and have a great week. I think there's Root and Branch this week on Tuesday and Thursday, so I'm not sure if it's going to be like that every week. Last time it was Monday and Wednesday. Tuesday is my father, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Nunes, and the Costa Rican and Israeli Revolutions of 1948 by Ambassador Caresses. It's His Excellency Ambassador Rodrigo Xavier Carreras Jimenez, talking about some history I'm not too familiar with, but I'll be on the program. Jennifer is invited, but she could do the text. She doesn't need to be there. And then on Thursday, Pilgrim Society, Privy Council, and Intellectual Property Theft by John Barwell and Michael McKibben. And John Barwell is actually from Metro Detroit, Lowell's friend, Roseanne Barr's friend. So I've met him only through Lowell, but so I guess he has some expertise on intellectual property, Michael McKibben. So that will be on Thursday. And I think he said he's got a full schedule for the next few months. So I'm looking forward to being back, streaming. And, obviously I love Judaism. I love Israel. So to be at a podcast out of Jerusalem, my pleasure. Jennifer, she's listed as the tech support, but the time differences, it may not be practical for her to be on the calls unless it's like a interesting enough topic where it'd be pay for her to meet at the hours, but she could still do the tech support for Root and Branch at her own hours. So excited about that. Looking forward to that. Anyone who likes that content, just check the Root and Branch page. And so I guess, hopefully Charles Moskowitz will be back. Looks like Ricardo's in the chat, so hopefully he's repented, become a little better person. Maybe Pelu will come on Week in Review at some point. Maybe Luke Ford if he wants to continue talking. I'm not sure. I know Drek plans to be on the show, but it's very possible. So anything you want to say, Memes or Jennifer, before I sign off?
Thanks for joining. As always, is great. Sorry it got monopolized by Memes in my conversation.
I didn't have any much to say. I covered the things I wanted to review this week. So, just interesting to hear you two talk for a little bit. But, at a certain point, I got a lot on my mind. So I'll keep on my research. But, glad that we could create a little community and friendly conversation. And I think we could turn Memes into a subject expert in dueling. And, he's got good streaming potential. Like Ricardo, there's a lot of people with more talent than you, Memes. However, you seem more stable and consistent. So, likely that the steady style will do well. So you got the Ricardo, these burnouts, these, people who just had so much talent, but couldn't control their baser urges and didn't refine their character and exhibit enough impulse control that they sputtered out. So it's always interesting to see the rise and fall of personalities like that.
Well, it ain't the easy thing, man. It's easy to get burnt out.
What's we need Week in Review for?
Well, yeah. Thank you for the homework.
You need to peer review best practices.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, awesome. So have a great week.
Yeah, I just realized that next week is episode 100. So, woohoo! Congratulations to us for sticking to it, because I feel like we've really found or hit our stride.
Yeah, we got to get those books out. Like I was mentioning to Memes, like the becoming an expert, at least in one field, to having a book on it. So you become an expert in dueling, and then you come out with a book. And so if you enjoy streaming, at some point to get your name, get your ideas, or profit off of it, the next logical step is a book. So me and Jennifer both wanted to do books. Hitting episode 100, maybe we should push it a little bit more. We got decent numbers, but you have to have it the serious level where we think there is actually books coming out in the near future.
Okay. And nothing wrong with publication.
Yeah, it's the next logical step for us. You might be a few steps down before a book, but I think me and Jennifer are both basically books are both of me and her's next logical step.
Yeah, let me know if you're working on any writing. I can be happy to take a look at it for you.
Okay, yeah, we'll do. So hopefully we'll talk about that next week. So have a great week, everyone.
You too.
Peace out, too,
Take care. Tom, I don't know what's on tap for episode 100 because I don't really live in the world of numerical constructs. So 100 is basically the same as, 64 or 509, But
they all start to blend together.
Does anybody have any ideas? Like, I'm really just more the supporting type. Like, I'm not, you know.
Supporting via the Church of Entropy.
Yeah, it's a church that entropizes your illusions and turns them into a pile of ashes, and then you blow them off, and then you become a super awesome scientist.
Well, sometimes before creation, there must be destruction.
Well, yeah, there's like a, what do you call it? A story about a guy who went to go see a swami to learn from him, but he wouldn't let him learn because he said he already knew too much, so he had to purge himself of all the stuff he already had clogging him up. And I think that's true to an extent, but it's also true that like some of the skills are transferable. It's just that, you know, the beliefs have to shift before the approach will really work. Because it's like a, you know, what do you call it? One of those things where you drop a marble in it and it goes down all the different, a pinball machine.
Oh, I like those. Sonic Spinball is kind of fun. It was hard to beat it.
Yeah, like the hole is clogged when you start.
I mean, that sounds like something that we have surgeons for, because otherwise you end up having a heart attack.
Yeah, I'm the surgeon, I'm the plumber. I plumb the hole, and then maybe you can get it. But in my, you know, in this metaphor, winning is losing, I guess.
Oh, how very dualistic of you.
Well, you really, I mean, let's just take this metaphor where pinball, where winning is losing, or losing is winning, rather. So you want to bring that marble into the loser hole, right? But you can't because it's blocked. And if you, the more
Well,
you try to unblock it, the more it fills up. So you need someone to plumb it for you because it's outside of your expertise because you are the pinball machine. And it's a metaphor for self-study. Because how do you know what the right route towards self-study is? Like, what is it about yourself exactly you're supposed to be studying? So to get your own focus to go inward, it's not always obvious how
we
that
need to
works.
we need to extend outward and ask other observers.
Do you?
I mean, I think it helps.
The majority of what I know comes from self-study, though.
Right. Well, you're helping me.
So how can I talk to other people to gain knowledge if most of what I know comes from self-study?
Relatability.
That's not any kind of answer. It's not possible. Either you're getting knowledge from yourself or from others, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to get better knowledge, you have to go through yourself every time. That is, if you don't agree with what someone is saying, you don't believe it either. Now, most people don't do this because they're just inculcated with whatever their parents tell them.
Well, I mean, I tend to go along the route of, okay, there are things that I think I know. Other people think they know things. Let's compare them. Let's contrast them. Let's see what happens. Is this a logical statement? Is this a logical progression based upon the arguments we have and the data that we have? How precise is the data? How complicated is the system? I mean, we're going to weigh all those things out, or at least I try to give it a shot at a time to see what's actually going on and try to modify my model and conceptualize maybe a couple of different models at a time, holding them, entertaining them, seeing what may or may not be true, and where it may or may not go in the future.
All with the assumption that you could become enlightened by your own intelligence.
I mean, yeah, but I tend to rely on the kindness of others.
It's impossible to become enlightened by your own intelligence.
Yeah. I believe fusion is a very powerful thing.
So you think
Sometimes,
maybe you'll succeed where everyone else has failed?
I mean, it's not probable, and I know that I'm not the answer, but you know what? If our actions end up affecting others and other folks can actually try to improve themselves in the world around us,
But
it's
that's
like I
assuming
get,
that your actions are improving the lives of others. On what basis?
oh, I have no friggin' idea.
Yeah,
It's
so you're assuming ad hoc that your influence in the world is good, which is a completely stupid assumption. But everybody pretty much does it. But that aside, it's stupid.
I mean, I try to minimize evil. I mean, I totally fail at that. I acknowledge that, but it's one of those things where it's like I have seen folks that I have spoken to over a while. I've seen a genesis. Maybe that would have happened normally. Maybe I had some influence. Do I think my influence completely changed everything in that person? Oh, hell no. Everyone's their own individual. But at the same time, the people you come around, the people that you associate and interact with, I mean, that's all experience. It's all about our own personal and interacting cosmic wave functions.
That's just completely empty words.
Is it untrue?
Why would you just say something with no information content, if not deflecting from something of more substantial importance?
I mean, I think I was kind of framing
Like,
something in a
what are you
slightly coy
saying?
way.
What are you saying? You're saying whatever.
Everyone affects everybody.
Yeah, so it's trivial, tautological. So we want to stay away from trivial tautologies because it's really just dead air. It's just filling up dead air. It's just talking for no reason, basically.
But isn't that why you're here?
To talk for no reason? No.
To influence people?
Right. And that doesn't happen unless you speak in a way that influences people.
Right.
And being uncareful with words is one of the easiest ways to diminish your influence. So if what you're really after is influence, I can tell you how to get influence. Because as you may know, I have a lot of it. Because it's just like, yeah, we can't keep this charade up anymore with Big Bang and denying quantum mind and all this other stuff. It's just like really hard to deny quantum mind now, and really hard to affirm Big Bang now, because it's like those things are pretty much disproven.
Is your goal to say what is true, or is your goal to try to convince other people to what is true?
I would say neither. My goal is to uplift people and give them a better life.
Aren't those empty words too, or?
I don't think so. I'm telling you what I want. It may be it's a very generalized thing, but that is an accurate way to describe it. And then you'd ask, how do I do that, right? You could test whether I was full of shit by saying, how do I do that?
I mean, I don't think you're full of shit. You actually
sound
genuine.
You should be very skeptical until you're convinced. Then you should be 100% faithful. See, this is the problem. You want to have it both ways. You think you can be skeptical forever. It doesn't work like that. The skepticism has diminishing returns and then negative returns at a certain point.
Right. Well, I mean, wouldn't that be functional skepticism?
It's skepticism unless you're sure, then it's the opposite of skepticism.
I'm talking about skepticism as like a process. Basically, okay, I'm unfamiliar with this. I'm skeptical. I'm looking at this. I'm receiving more and more information that's confirming this. So would I necessarily be as skeptical of it? Probably not. While also maintaining
that's not how you want to do it at all. That's like brainwashing yourself, basically.
I'm confused.
No, you want to assume everything is wrong.
No, I'm just being skeptical.
That is what skeptical is assuming everything is wrong. You didn't do that. You assumed, well, some stuff must be right.
I thought I was having I need to think of new words. Basically having a healthy, not necessarily assuming something to be true just because somebody necessarily states it. An investigation would be warranted. And again, if something does seem to have a track record of proven to be true, it's like, okay, we're probably going to be more open to this.
You don't see the problem with that way of thinking, that you have no way of knowing when your standard of evidence has been met. So you can just keep shifting the goalposts and never accept anything as true.
Well, I mean, you need to set metrics for that.
And you haven't.
Haven't I?
Well, what are they?
In which regard?
What's your metric for acceptance of a unified field model?
Oh, well, I mean, I do weight in
You don't
Is
have an
this what
answer.
people-
You don't have an answer, because if you did, you'd have already completely embraced my model, because it does meet this standard. So you're saying I want to be able to be skeptical forever, because then I never have to own any beliefs and be accountable for them.
I apologize. I haven't looked at your
You
model.
don't have to apologize. I mean, it's your own, it's obvious you have an attachment to the idea that you can continue to deny allegiance to any beliefs, the same way Aiken was doing. This is like the individualist fallacy. It's like, well, I'm going to outsmart. It's like, that's just literally how easy the mind control is. It's like, they can tell you on the one hand, be rebellious, and then they can tell you the opposite of what they want you to do. And then you'll rebel against that. So you'll walk right into the trap. You're doing what they want by rebelling, is my point.
Are you calling me a liberalist?
No, I'm just saying that if you allow for liberalism to come into science, it's no longer science.
I like science.
Well, then why are you pursuing it singularities?
I haven't read your model.
But I mean, just on their own basis, think about it. Be skeptical. Why should the universe admit singularities?
Well, I don't know. It hypothetically could explain some things. Is the best answer? I don't know.
So nothing? So your best answer is it hypothetically is a hypothetical? That's a bad sign. So where was your skepticism when it came to accepting this Big Bang belief? It wasn't operating, was it?
I've been thinking about this a little bit, but then again, it's to say this and to try to defend it unless I have an ulterior working model, then I mean that's kind of hard to do.
Because you never were taught. You were told that you were taught how to think, but you were actually just brainwashed with propaganda. So now you have this false belief, not you specifically, like everybody basically has false belief that they actually know something, but then you interrogate the beliefs and they can't defend them. That's not how it's supposed to work. Your conviction's supposed to get stronger the more you get interrogated, not weaker. Not like, oh crap, I didn't. That's like foundation of sand, right?
I feel like when you use the terms brainwashed and mind controlled, rather
That is
than
what it is.
rather than lacking information and perhaps presented a suboptimal model, you're kind of agitating people.
Well, who am I agitating?
People that don't want to hear that they've been brainwashed and mind controlled.
Well, you can't get past whatever. See, the thing is that brainwashing is a generic term and it applies all the way through to like the ego itself. So you could say like the ego's brainwashed itself into believing that it exists. So you can't, the point is that everybody has quote unquote brainwashed type beliefs, because it's just like your conscious subroutines that you're not fully transcendent of their mechanisms, which most people aren't even transcendent of any of them. So if you understand it that way, that's the only way to get past it. If you don't think you're brainwashed, you can't unbrainwash yourself.
I just think you can kind of say the same thing and not necessarily those same words, that just at least from a mimetic or heuristic perspective, people like, oh my God, you're saying everything that I know is untrue. And even if that were the case, to say that to a person, it's like they very
But it's not up to you to make that judgment, because you're saying, well, I know better how not to hurt people's egos than you, Jen, which is insulting to me, because obviously I know the best.
I'm just saying it's an
So to
additional
think
model.
that you could have possibly better judgment than me is also indicative of a problem in your own thought process.
Well, I'm just interacting with another human being and just giving my opinion.
But that's not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is to increase the amount of knowledge. And you can't increase my amount of knowledge. It's not physically possible. You might be able to give me a better metaphor, but you're never going to teach me anything. And none of you are. So just get that out of your heads right now.
But aren't we all made of information?
Exactly. It's like, I should be able to LARP as the teacher once in a while. It's like, no. You have to have integrity. It must always be this way, or the very boundary that allows for the information that you're after to cross is destroyed. You're saying I want divine knowledge, but I also want to destroy the means by which divine knowledge is attained? Can't have it both ways.
I mean, I enjoy being a student.
Do you? Because you keep pontificating about singularities, which implies you want to teach about singularities, doesn't it?
You seem very aggravated over the word singularities.
Well, do I have a right to be?
Oh no! If you are in fact correct, which at least the way you're laying it out to it is very very strong likelihood. I'm putting together models right now in my head. I'm like, oh, this might actually explain a lot then. But it's
Yeah,
no,
just
no,
let
I hear you.
yourself like take a bath in the Ganges, right? Let your sins be washed away. Just it's you who's hanging on to them. I'm not hanging on to them, and I'm saying I'm not going to try to unclench your hand from them. You're going to have to say, this has been holding me back. It's not an accurate depiction of what's happening. There's a history there. We don't want to go into it because we don't see necessarily the value to going into it. But nevertheless, this depiction is the one that allows us to get past the negative aspects of this manifestation fastest. All I'm doing is re-engineering the rebellious instinct into something that's not self-destructive.
This is very meta. I love
Yeah,
this,
well,
but
I
I'm
mean,
tired.
we have to think about how we're thinking, because what I have to do is link up all of your, you think of your personality as like the what's the one, Medusa? You know what that is? The lady with all the snakes growing out
The
of her
snakes.
head. Yeah, so
I
think of each of those snakes as all the different sides of you. So I got to grab the snake by the head and shove it into the right, like I got to plug it into the right plug. So I got to know about those snakes before I attempt to shove them into plugs.
I don't think that's how snakes and outlets work. But conceptually I hear what you're saying. It's like, all right, you have all these different facets. You need the right coupling to plug it into the right area to maximize. See, I prefer to think of it more like Voltron. It's like, let's go Voltron force. It's like activate interthrusters. Mega thrusters are go. And you initiate and you form with the Lions, and the Power Rangers / Super Sentai rip you off. Actually, that was all ripped off from Super Sentai.
That happens after you've been plugged in. Can't really go Super Saiyan until you've been plugged in. Not just been plugged in, but gotten used to the current going through you all the time.
Good. It was
Because
just
you're changing your own base frequency. So humans have throughout their history developed tremendous amount of knowledge, including enlightenment knowledge, which is not very well known, but it essentially comes down to a calibration of the fundamental node of your mind, because you're at a particular frequency, right? So you have the generating frequency, which is the heart, and then all the other frequencies are ultimately derivative of the heart. Okay. And through the practice and the experience, the yogis have found a better frequency for them, the enlightenment frequency. So it's like, how do you get to that frequency? Well, you have to get plugged in, and then the current's going to run through you, and you have to not get like electrocuted in that process. So someone's got to plug in those hairs of Medusa. It's got to be an expert, is my point. Because otherwise, it's just because if even one of those snakes doesn't get plugged in, what's going to happen? Probably going to undermine the integrity of the rest of the snake matrix, right?
So what you're saying is you have all your snakes plugged in?
Oh, since before this life. And when what I had to do was unplug some of the snakes, plug them in eigen states. So this is all science, right? It's just extremely difficult science because you have to actually be capable of perceiving your own consciousness as a thing, which is what I think is good about you, because I do think you have that level of self-awareness. Whereas other people, it's challenging no matter who you are, but I think you can get past that hurdle. Whereas some people might, it's not easy, It's not for everybody, but it's real.
I wish I had
So
the
you're
ticker right
basically-
now at the bottom. Mind blown.
But yeah, sounds like you're tired, so I don't want to push, and it doesn't sound like anyone else wants to come on. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm in a bad mood. I'm just showing tough love here because I want memes to be as happy as physically possible for him at this point in his existence, whether that's enlightenment or not. He doesn't have to go to full enlightenment to get some benefits, but he needs to everybody needs to understand what the context of what the dualism is between those two states, because it's the context for everything else, even if you don't feel ready to pursue it. Existence is the first thing, i.e., what you believe is possible is the soil upon which the beliefs and experiences grow. So yeah, did you want to say anything else before we say goodbye? Oh, sorry, I didn't put you full screen. I meant to do that, but I guess I must be getting a little tired. I meant to put you full screen when Doovid pieced out, but I will be doing my best to do that because you do take the time to go on camera, so I want to honor that.
Oh, no worries, no worries. No, again, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for coming on and getting a little nerdy with me in LDG the other day. It definitely was
That was
quite
really
fun. I would like to kind of do it again because now you've made me quite, because I was going to put together a video of a whole bunch of other videos and try to say, like, is this science? And now you've got me taking a step back, questioning this and be like, okay, do I need to do another video? Does this video even make sense? Will I just do this anyway for kind of a shabam and then kind of maybe look into your model and be like, oh, is this just a simpler explanation? Does not Occam's razor apply? And then build people up and then kind of provide a counterpoint that may kick them in their Bayesian priors.
Ooh, nicely said.
Hey, I've been hanging around these communities enough.
Watch this space, everyone. If you want to see my appearance, I have added it to the list of live stream appearances on my playlist on YouTube, so you can check that out. The link to the chat about the consciousness on Root and Branch that I mentioned earlier is also on that list. So it's a compilation that I try to more or less keep every appearance that I've done. And those are the ones that could be a little more interesting, specifically for special topics. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next Sunday, if not sooner.
That's just so to say, a worthless opinion of.
It's so important that she can't be told, she won't be told that it's wrong. And
bringing it back to Church of Entropy in her attack dog Gandalf the White.
Why don't you learn to shut up and fuck your goddamn logic?
They control the media, and the media is capable of making the sheeple believe in anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, we've had these streams, and I've been doing with Church of Entropy, and she's been bringing on new people, and like we did those streams on like stream etiquette. We walk through like the technology.
I have like very strongly negative opinions of the kind of Brundle clique.
Is she trying to garner herself cult prestige by associating